When I walked into the courtroom, my daughter giggled, and my son-in-law shook his head in mock pity. The bailiff looked at my worn-out jacket and almost guided me to the public seating area instead of the defendant table. But then the judge entered. Judge Vance paused mid-step. His face went pale, and his hands started shaking as he whispered, "My God, is that really him?" Everyone turned and stared. The silence was heavy enough to crush a man. Nobody in that room had a clue who I really was until that day. They thought they were evicting a senile old man who used to fix trains. They did not know they were standing in front of the silent owner of the very ground their courthouse was built on. My name is Eldridge Hayes. I am 68 years old. To the world and to my own ungrateful family, I am just a retired maintenance worker, living on a pension that barely covers my heart medication. I wear work boots that have seen 3 decades of mud, and I drive a truck that sounds like a dying thunderstorm. But there is a difference between being broke and being quiet. My daughter Jasmine and her husband Brent made the fatal mistake of confusing my silence for weakness. Before I tell you how I brought their entire empire down with a single signature, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The war between us did not start in that courtroom. It started 2 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon that smelled of rain and betrayal. The sound of metal hitting concrete is something you never forget, especially when that metal is your life's work. My red toolbox hit the driveway with a deafening crash. Wrenches, sockets, and screwdrivers scattered across the wet pavement like shrapnel. I stood there in the drizzle, watching my collection of 40 years lie in the mud. Brent, my son-in-law, stood on the porch. He did not even look at me. He was too busy rolling up a large blueprint and checking his expensive watch. He was a tall man, with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to work for $1 in your life. He adjusted his silk tie and waved a dismissive hand at the mess he had just made. "Get this junk out of here, Eldridge," Brent said. His voice was flat and bored. "We need to clear out the basement. The investors for Colton Plaza are coming for a walkthrough on Friday, and I cannot have them seeing a grease monkey workshop in my house." I looked at the wrench lying nearest to my boot. It was a snap-on torque wrench I had bought in 1982 with my first big paycheck. That tool had fixed the tracks that carried supplies to half of Georgia. Now it was just junk to a man who could not change a tire if his life depended on it. "This is my home too, Brent," I said. My voice was calm, but my chest felt tight. "I paid the down payment on this house." Brent finally looked at me. He laughed. A short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "You paid a down payment 10 years ago, Eldridge. Jasmine and I have been paying the mortgage. This is our house. The basement is now designated as the wine cellar. Your tools do not fit the aesthetic. Move them to the shed, or I will call the hauling company to take them to the dump." He turned his back on me and went back inside. He did not care that it was raining. He did not care that at 68 years old, bending down to pick up heavy iron was a battle for my joints. He only cared about his blueprints and his precious Colton Plaza project. I knelt down on the wet concrete. The rain was getting heavier, soaking through my flannel shirt. I reached for my tools. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from a rage I had not felt since the war. "Bip! Dad!" I looked up. Jasmine was standing in the doorway, my beautiful daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders at parades. The girl whose tuition I had paid for by working double shifts and skipping meals. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my truck. She looked at me kneeling in the rain, and there was no pity in her eyes, only annoyance. "Jasmine," I said, "tell your husband that I need a place for my things. The basement has been my room for 5 years. She sighed and leaned against the doorframe, protecting her hair from the humidity. "Dad, please do not make a scene. Brent is under a lot of pressure right now. This project is huge for his firm. If he lands the Colton Plaza deal, we are going to be set for life. We need the house to look perfect." I stood up slowly, wiping the mud from my hands. "Perfect means throwing your father out into the yard." "You smell like oil, Dad," Jasmine said, wrinkling her nose. "It permeates everything. The investors are high-profile people. We cannot have the house smelling like a garage. Just move your stuff to the shed in the backyard. It is dry enough." The shed. She meant the rotting wooden structure at the edge of the property that we used to store fertilizer. It had no insulation, no heating, and a roof that leaked every time a bird landed on it. I took a step toward the door. "I need to get my heart medication, Jasmine. It is on the nightstand in the basement. She stepped in front of me, blocking the entrance. Her eyes darted to the street, checking if any neighbors were watching. No, Dad. You are muddy. Stay out here. I will bring the pills to you later. Just go to the shed and get settled. We have the cleaning crew coming in 20 minutes. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I searched for the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee, waiting for me to kiss it better. She was gone. In her place was a woman who saw me as a stain on her perfect life. I am your father, I whispered, and I am trying to build a future, Jasmine snapped. Go to the shed, Dad, please. She closed the heavy oak door in my face. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place sounded like a gunshot. I was alone in the rain. I spent the next hour dragging my heavy toolbox across the muddy lawn to the shed. My breath came in short, painful gasps. My left arm was tingling, a warning sign I knew too well from my doctor, but I ignored it. I had work to do. The shed was worse than I remembered. The air inside was stale and smelled of mold and dead mice. The single window was cracked, and the wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden planks. There was an old cot in the corner, covered in a dusty tarp. This was it. This was where they wanted me. Out of sight, out of mind. I sat down on the edge of the cot, shivering as the dampness seeped into my bones. I wiped the rain from my face. I wanted to cry, but tears were a luxury I could not afford. I had promised my wife Etta on her deathbed that I would always look out for Jasmine. I wondered what Etta would say if she could see me now, shivering in a garden shed while our daughter drank wine in the warm house we had built together. Suddenly I heard a voice. It was Brent. He was standing on the back patio under the awning, talking loudly on his phone. He did not know I was just 20 feet away, sitting in the dark shed with the door cracked open. I am telling you it is a disaster, Brent shouted into the phone. We have acquired every parcel for the plaza except one. Lot number 7, the corner lot, the one right in the middle of where the main entrance is supposed to go. I froze. I stopped shivering. I sat very still. I know, Brent continued pacing back and forth. The city records say it is owned by some shell company called HE Holdings. Nobody knows who is behind it. My lawyers have sent letters and offers, but they all bounce back. If we do not get Lot 7, the whole project falls apart. We have borrowed $3 million against this house, and the firm based on the projection that the plaza goes through. He kicked a patio chair in frustration. Find the owner. I do not care what it costs. Find out who owns HE Holdings and offer them whatever they want. Or find some dirt on them so we can force a sale. Just get it done. He hung up and stormed back inside, slamming the sliding glass door. I sat in the darkness, and for the first time that day I smiled. Brent was an architect. He was smart. He was ambitious. But he was arrogant. He never bothered to ask me what I did with the money I made from selling my patent to the railway company back in '95. He never asked me why I spent my weekends driving around the city, looking at dilapidated neighborhoods. He never asked what my middle name was. My middle name is Eldridge. My first name is Harrison. HE Holdings. Harrison Eldridge Holdings. I reached down to my muddy toolbox. It looked like a piece of junk, dented, scratched, and covered in grease, just like me. I opened the main compartment and moved the heavy wrenches aside. My fingers found the false bottom I had welded in there 20 years ago. I pried it open. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic and protected from the world, were the original deeds. I pulled out the document on top. It was yellowed with age, but the stamp from the city clerk was clear. Deed of ownership. Lot 7. Downtown District. Owner. HE Holdings. I held the paper in my trembling hands. Brent needed this piece of paper to save his career. He needed this piece of paper to pay off the debts that were secretly drowning him. He was willing to destroy his family to build his plaza. He had just thrown the owner of Lot 7 out into the rain. I looked at the document, and then I looked at the house where the lights were warm and inviting. I could hear music starting to play. The investors were arriving early. They wanted a show. They wanted to see success. They wanted to see a perfect family. I tucked the deed into the inside pocket of my wet jacket right next to my heart. You want the land, Brent? I whispered to the cold air. You are going to have to crawl through the mud to get it. My chest tightened again, but this time it was not from pain. It was from anticipation. I stood up and walked to the cracked window, watching the guests arrive in their luxury cars. I saw Jasmine greeting them, laughing her fake laugh, holding a glass of champagne. Tomorrow they were planning to take me to court to declare me incompetent. They wanted to put me in a home so they could take control of my pension and sell this house without my interference. I knew their plan. I had heard them whispering. But they had forgotten the first rule of construction. Before you tear something down, you better make sure you know what is holding it up. I sat back down on the cot and waited for the morning. The rain drummed against the roof like a war drum. Let them have their party. My party would begin in the courtroom. And unlike them, I did not need champagne to celebrate. I just needed the truth. The night was long and cold, but I did not sleep. I spent every hour planning every word I would say to the judge. I rehearsed the moment their faces would crumble. But I had no idea that the next morning would bring a betrayal far worse than being kicked out of my own house. I thought I had seen the bottom of their cruelty. I was wrong. The bottom was much deeper, and it was filled with something far more dangerous than just greed. The next afternoon, the sun came out, but it brought no warmth to my life. The storm had passed physically, but inside the Colton household, a hurricane was brewing. I was sitting in the shed cleaning the mud off a socket wrench when the door flew open. It was Brent. He was holding a bundle of black fabric that smelled of mothballs and stale closets. He threw it at me. The bundle hit my chest and unraveled onto the dirty floor. It was a waiter uniform. Specifically, it was a cheap polyester tuxedo jacket and a pair of oversized trousers that looked like they had been part of a high school theater production 10 years ago. "Put this on," Brent said. His voice was tight with stress. "The catering service is short one server. I am not paying you to sit in a shed and rot while I host the most important night of my career. You are going to earn your keep." I picked up the jacket. It was stiff and scratchy. I looked at Brent. "You want me to serve drinks?" "I want you to be useful," Brent snapped, "and shave that beard. You look like a homeless person. I told the guests you were a charity case we took in, a distant relative who fell on hard times. Do not speak to anyone unless they order a drink. Do not make eye contact. And for God's sake, try to stand up straight." He turned and left, leaving the door swinging in the wind. I held the cheap jacket in my hands. My fingers brushed against the rough fabric. In my other life, the life Brent knew nothing about, I wore suits tailored on Seville Row. I wore silk ties that cost more than this entire catering budget. But tonight I had to play the part. I had to become the ghost they thought I was. I put on the uniform. The pants were too long, bunching around my heavy work boots, because I refused to wear the cheap plastic shoes Brent had tossed in the pile. The jacket was tight around my shoulders, a reminder that even at 68, I still had the build of a man who worked with steel. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror of the shed. A clown, that is what I looked like. But clowns have a way of surprising people. I walked into the main house through the kitchen entrance. The transformation was startling. My daughter house had been turned into a palace of superficiality. Expensive flower arrangements covered every surface. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Brent was terrified. I could see it in the way he adjusted his cufflinks every 10 seconds. He needed money. He needed investors. And he needed this night to be perfect. I grabbed a silver tray of champagne flutes. My hands were steady. I walked out into the crowd. The room was filled with the elite of Atlanta, or at least the people who thought they were the elite. I moved through them like a shadow, offering drinks and taking empty glasses. Nobody looked at me. To them, I was just furniture. I was a prop in the background of their important lives. Then I saw him. Standing near the fireplace, laughing loudly at his own joke, was Charles Whitmore. My heart skipped a beat. Charles Whitmore, the man who had tried to execute a hostile takeover of my logistics company in the 90s. The man who had cut corners on safety regulations to save a few pennies. The man I had crushed in a boardroom battle that is still studied in business schools. Charles looked older now, his hair thinning and his waistline expanding, but the arrogance was exactly the same. He was the lead investor Brent was trying to woo. I walked toward him. My tray was heavy, but my steps were light. I stopped right in front of him. "Champagne, sir?" I asked, keeping my head lowered. Charles did not even glance at my face. He just reached out a fleshy hand and took a glass. He was in the middle of a story, so I told him, "Look, if you want the zoning permit, you have to grease the right wheels." He laughed, and the men around him laughed with him. I stood there, holding the tray, listening to him brag about deals that I knew were built on lies. He had no idea that the man who had destroyed his empire 20 years ago was standing 12 inches away, serving him sparkling wine. It took every ounce of my discipline not to speak, not to say, "Hello, Charles. Do you remember the bankruptcy filing of '98? But I waited. Patience is a weapon. Suddenly, disaster struck. It was not my fault. A young waiter, rushing to the kitchen with a tray of empty hors d'oeuvre plates, tripped on the edge of the rug. He stumbled forward and bumped hard into my shoulder. I kept my balance. I did not drop a single glass, but the impact sent a wave of red wine slouching out of a glass held by the woman standing next to Charles. The dark liquid arched through the air in slow motion. It missed Charles' suit. It missed the woman's dress. It landed directly on Brent's shoes. The room went silent. The music seemed to stop. Brent looked down. His pristine, tan Italian loafers were now stained with a dark purple blotch that was spreading rapidly into the leather. These were not just shoes. They were his armor. They were the symbol of the success he did not actually have. Brent's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple rage and white panic. He looked at the young waiter who was trembling. Then he looked at me. He needed a scapegoat. He needed someone to punish, to show these powerful men that he was in charge. "You clumsy old fool," Brent roared. I stood still, holding the silver tray. "It was not me, Brent," I said calmly. "Do not lie to me," Brent shouted. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. "You bumped him. I saw you. You are clumsy and you are useless. Look at what you did. These are Vittorio loafers. Do you have any idea what these cost?" I knew exactly what they cost. I knew because my holding company owned the exclusive import rights for Vittorio in the Southeast. I knew the stitching was done by hand in Milan. I knew the leather was calfskin, and I knew Brent could not afford them. Jasmine rushed over. Her face was pale. "Brent, please," she whispered, touching his arm. "People are watching." "I do not care," Brent hissed, pulling away from her. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred. He pointed at the floor. "Clean it up." I looked at the stain on his shoe. "You want me to get a towel?" I asked. "No," Brent said. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I want you to clean it now, on your knees. Use your napkin. Show some respect for the things you destroyed." The room was deadly quiet. Charles Whitmore was watching with a smirk on his face. The other guests were looking away, pretending not to see the humiliation. Jasmine bit her lip, but she did not speak. She did not step in. She let her husband order her father to his knees. I looked at Jasmine. I gave her one last chance to be my daughter. One last chance to stop this madness. She looked down at the floor, avoiding my gaze. "Fine," I said. I set the silver tray down on a side table. I took the white linen napkin from my arm. My knees popped loudly as I lowered myself to the floor. The pain in my joints was sharp, but the pain in my heart was dull and cold. I knelt at the feet of my son-in-law. I began to dab at the wine on his shoe. The leather was ruined. The acid in the wine would eat the finish, but I wiped it anyway. I wiped it with the rhythm of a man who has scrubbed floors and fixed engines and built skyscrapers. There is no shame in labor. The shame was all theirs. As I worked, I felt a pair of shoes near my face. It was Charles Whitmore. He had stepped closer to get a better look at the show. He was enjoying this. He liked seeing a man on his knees. I looked at Charles' shoes. They were cheap, knockoffs. He was not doing as well as he pretended. I finished wiping Brent's shoe. It was still stained, but it was dry. I started to stand up. As I rose, I paused. My face was level with Charles Whitmore's ear. The music had started again, and the conversation was buzzing so nobody could hear us. I leaned in, just an inch. "Sell the Omnicorp shares, Charles," I whispered. My voice was low, gravelly, and unmistakable. "The merger is dead. The SEC is raiding their offices at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I pulled back. Charles Whitmore froze. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide. He turned to look at me, but I was already turning away. He knew that voice. He knew that tone. It was the voice that had haunted his nightmares 2 decades ago. But it was impossible. The man who owned that voice was a titan, not a waiter in an ill-fitting suit. "Who did you say that was, Charles?" asked Brent, his voice shaking slightly. "Just my father-in-law," Brent said, smoothing his jacket, unaware that he had just lost his biggest investor. "He is senile. Ignore him." I walked to the kitchen. I did not stop. I walked past the catering staff who were looking at me with pity. I walked out the back door into the cool night air. I walked all the way to the shed. I took off the ridiculous jacket and threw it on the floor. I sat down on my cot and pulled my old flip phone from my pocket. It was a burner phone, untraceable and secure. My hands were not shaking. They were steady as stone. I dialed a number that I had not called in 5 years. It rang twice. "Yes, sir," a voice answered. It was Cohen, my attorney. "Initiate Protocol 4, I said. There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure, sir?" "Protocol 4 is the scorched earth option. It will freeze the assets of every subsidiary connected to the Colton project. It will trigger immediate audits. It will bankrupt him within 48 hours. I looked at the main house. I could see Brent's silhouette in the window, laughing, holding a fresh glass of wine. He thought he was a king because he made an old man kneel. He did not know that the old man was the one holding the crown. "I am sure," I said. "Do it." "And Cohen?" "Yes, sir. Buy all the Omnicorp stock you can get your hands on as soon as it crashes tomorrow. Then sell it when the rumor is proven false." "But sir, you told the guest—" "I told him a lie, Cohen. Let him sell. Let him panic. I want them all to feel what it is like to be powerless." I hung up the phone. I lay back on the cot and listened to the music drifting from the house. Protocol 4 had begun. By tomorrow morning, Brent credit cards would be declined. His construction loans would be called in. The land he thought he was about to buy would vanish from his grasp. I closed my eyes. They wanted me to be a servant. Fine. I had served them. I had served them a dish best served cold. But I knew this was just the beginning. When the money dried up, the real monster inside Brent would come out. He would look for someone to blame, and he would look at me. The next few days were going to be dangerous. I needed to be ready. I reached under my mattress and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. I checked the battery. Full. "Let them come," I whispered to the darkness. "I am ready." The following Saturday was Jasmine's 35th birthday. The house was once again filled with people who did not know her, but claimed to love her. They brought gifts wrapped in silver and gold paper boxes, from designers in Paris and Milan, and envelopes thick with cash. I stood in the corner of the living room holding my gift. It was small. I had wrapped it in the sports section of yesterday's newspaper, because Brent had hidden the Scotch tape and the fancy wrapping paper. To the guests, I looked like a confused old man holding a piece of trash. I waited until the cake had been cut and the champagne had been poured. Jasmine sat on the velvet sofa, surrounded by her friends, opening gifts with theatrical gasps of delight. "Oh, Brent, look at this Hermes scarf," she squealed. "It is perfect." I stepped forward. The room went quiet. The guests parted like the Red Sea, not out of respect, but out of discomfort. They did not want to be near the man in the faded flannel shirt. "Happy birthday, princess," I said softly, using the nickname I had given her when she was 3 years old. I held out the small package. Jasmine looked at the newspaper wrapping with disgust. Her friends covered their mouths to hide their giggles. She took the package, holding it with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "What is this, Dad?" she asked, her voice dripping with embarrassment. "Did you wrap this in garbage?" "It is what I have," I said. "Open it." She tore the paper off aggressively. Inside was a small blue bank book. It was old, with a worn leather cover. It looked like something from a different century. She flipped it open. She did not look at the balance. She did not look at the transaction history, which showed monthly deposits for 35 years. Compound interest is a powerful thing. If she had looked, she would have seen a number starting with a 2 and ending with 6 zeros. She would have seen that she was a multi-millionaire. But she did not look. She saw a bank book from a local credit union, and her mind made an assumption. "Oh, Dad," she sighed, closing the book with a snap. "You gave me your savings account. What is in here?" $50, $100. "It is for your future," I said. Jasmine laughed. It was a cruel sound. "My future. Dad, my shoes cost more than your entire life savings. You keep your Social Security pennies. Buy yourself some soap, or maybe a new shirt so you do not embarrass me next time." She tossed the book over her shoulder. It flew through the air and landed in the large metal trash bin in the corner of the room, nestled between dirty paper plates and half-eaten shrimp tails. I watched it land. $2 million. Gone. Just like that. I did not move to retrieve it. I did not scream. I just nodded. "Okay, Jasmine," I said. "I hope you enjoy your shoes." I turned and walked out the back door, leaving the party behind. The sound of their laughter followed me into the yard. They thought they had witnessed a pathetic moment. They did not know they had just thrown away their only lifeline. I needed air. I needed to be away from the toxicity. I walked toward the edge of the property near the woods, intending to take a long walk. But as I passed the shed, I heard a noise. Someone was inside my sanctuary. I crept closer, moving silently through the tall grass. The door was open. Through the gap I saw Brent. He was in a frenzy. He had pulled my heavy metal shelves away from the wall and was dumping boxes onto the floor. "Where is it?" he muttered to himself, kicking a box of old spark plugs. "Where is the connection?" He was looking for leverage. He was looking for dirt on the owner of Lot 7. He had become obsessed. He believed that if he dug deep enough, he would find a weakness in the mystery investor who was blocking his project. He grabbed a stack of papers from my workbench. These were not trash. They were copies of my property deeds, which I kept for reference. He held up the deed for the commercial complex on Peachtree Street. Then he held up the deed for the warehouse district. He looked at them and snorted. He laughed out loud. "Unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. "The old man is not just poor, he is delusional. He thought they were fake. He thought I was a senile hoarder collecting clippings and printing out fake deeds to pretend I was important. It never crossed his mind that the dirty man living in his shed actually owned half the city. His arrogance was a blinder so thick he could not see the sun. "This is all garbage," Brent yelled. He ripped the deed for the Peachtree complex in half. Then he ripped it again. He grabbed a handful of stock certificates, copies I had made for my records, and crumpled them into balls, throwing them against the wall. "Just a crazy old man collecting trash," he spat. "I am going to have this whole shed bulldozed next week." He continued to tear through my life. He overturned my jar of screws. He smashed my old radio, the one I listened to baseball games on. He was not just searching, he was punishing. He was taking out his frustration on my belongings because he could not find the man he was actually fighting. I stood outside the window, watching him destroy the evidence of his own salvation. If he had stopped for 1 second, if he had read the dates, if he had checked the notary stamps, he would have realized that he was holding the keys to his kingdom, but he was too busy destroying them. He finished his tantrum, breathing heavily. He kicked a pile of shredded paper one last time and stormed out of the shed, marching back toward the party to drink more champagne and lie to his investors. I waited until he was gone. Then I walked into the shed. It was a disaster zone. My tools were scattered. My papers were confetti. The smell of dust and violence hung in the air. I walked over to the pile of torn deeds. I picked up a fragment of the Lot 7 document. It was just a copy. The originals were safe in a bank vault downtown. But the symbolism was powerful. Most men would be furious. Most men would run into the house screaming, "Look what you did, you idiot! Look at what I own!" But I was not most men. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I picked up the torn paper and smoothed it out on the workbench. I looked at the jagged tear that ran right through my name. "They are not just cruel," I whispered to myself. "They are stupid." Cruelty I could handle. I had dealt with cruel men in the army. I had dealt with cruel men in the boardroom. But stupidity combined with arrogance, that was a fatal disease, and my family was terminally ill. I realized then that I did not need to fight them. I did not need to scream or shout. I just needed to let them be exactly who they were. They were their own executioners. I began to clean up the mess. I picked up the screws one by one. I swept the paper scraps into a pile. I did not throw them away. I placed the torn pieces of the deeds into a clear plastic bag. I would keep them. I would tape them back together, and when the time came, I would show them this bag. I would show them exactly what they had torn up. I sat down on my cot amidst the ruins of my workshop. The party music was still thumping from the main house. Jasmine was probably dancing. Brent was probably boasting. Let them dance, I thought. Let them boast. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had a text message from Judge Vance. It was short. I reviewed the docket. "Your hearing is set for Friday. I will be presiding. Do not worry, old friend." I closed the phone. Friday, 3 days away. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to prove I was mentally unfit. I looked at the bag of torn papers. I looked at the empty space where my bank book should be. I laid down on the cot and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, because now I knew I had already won. The only question left was how much it was going to hurt them when they found out. 2 days before the hearing, the plumbing in the main house backed up. A pipe had burst under the master bedroom floorboards, likely due to the cheap renovations Brent had authorized a year ago. Instead of calling a professional plumber, which would cost money they did not have, Brent banged on the shed door at 6 in the morning. He told me to earn my keep. He told me to crawl under the house and fix the mess. I did not argue. I put on my coveralls and grabbed my wrench. I squeezed myself into the narrow crawl space beneath the foundation. It was dark, damp, and smelled of wet earth and copper. Spiders scurried away from the beam of my headlamp. I dragged my body over the rough dirt until I found the leak directly under the living room. As I clamped the pipe, I heard footsteps above me. The floorboards were thin old pine, covered by expensive rugs, but sound travels strangely in old houses. I could hear everything. It was Brent and Jasmine. And there was a third voice, a man, smooth, professional, and cold. "Are you sure this will work?" Brent asked. His voice was muffled but audible. "If the judge asks for a second opinion, we are screwed. The old man is stubborn, but he is not technically crazy. That is why we need to be proactive," the stranger replied. I recognized the voice. It was their lawyer, a man who specialized in estate law, but had a reputation for dirty tactics. "We need to establish a pattern of decline. Incompetence is not just about being forgetful. It is about being a danger to oneself. If we can prove he is a liability, the court will grant you immediate, temporary conservatorship. Once you have that, you control his finances, his medical decisions, and his living arrangements." I stopped turning the wrench. My heart hammered against my ribs loud enough that I was afraid they might hear it through the floor. "But he does not have any finances," Jasmine said. Her voice sounded small, hesitant. "He is broke. Why do we need a conservatorship? We just need to put him in a home." "It is a precaution," the lawyer said. "Brent told me he found deeds in the shed. Even if they are just copies or delusions, we need the legal authority to sign on his behalf. If that mysterious Lot 7 actually does belong to him, or if he is somehow listed on the title by mistake, you need the power to sign the transfer papers. If he is declared incompetent, his signature becomes yours." I lay there in the dirt, paralyzed. It was not just about getting rid of me. It was a heist. They were trying to steal my identity, legally. They wanted to strip me of my rights as a human being so they could sign away my empire. "We need an incident," Brent said. "Something undeniable. Something that happens in front of a medical professional." "Tonight," the lawyer said. "Make it happen tonight. Dr. Aris is on call. He owes me a favor. If the old man has an episode, Dr. Aris will be there to witness it and sign the commitment papers." I lay in the darkness for a long time after they left the room. I finished fixing the pipe. I tightened the bolt until my knuckles turned white. I was not fixing their house anymore. I was sealing my resolve. They wanted an incident. They wanted a crazy old man. I decided right then and there that I would give them the greatest performance of my life. I crawled out from under the house covered in mud and spider webs. I washed up at the garden hose. I did not go back to the shed. I sat on the back porch and waited for the sun to go down. I watched the shadows lengthen across the lawn, and I thought about the plays I used to watch with Etta. She loved theater. She always said that the best actors are the ones who make the audience believe the lie is the truth. Dinner was served at 7 o'clock. Usually, I ate alone in the kitchen after they had finished, or I took a plate to the shed. But tonight, Jasmine came to the back door. She was smiling. It was a tight, forced smile that did not reach her eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "come eat with us. I made gumbo, your favorite." I looked at her. She was wearing an apron over her designer dress, trying to play the role of the dutiful daughter. It broke my heart. She was willing to drug her own father for a signature. "Thank you, Jasmine," I said. "That sounds nice." I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china. Candles were flickering. Brent was already seated, pouring wine. He looked at me and nodded, a gesture that was supposed to be welcoming, but looked more like a predator acknowledging its prey. "Sit down, Eldridge," Brent said, pointing to the chair opposite him. "You worked hard on the pipes today. You deserve a hot meal." I sat down. The bowl of gumbo was placed in front of me. It was thick and dark, smelling of okra and spices. But under the aroma of the Cajun seasoning, there was something else, a faint chemical scent, acrid, metallic. I had spent 2 years in a field hospital unit during the war. I knew the smell of sedatives. I knew what crushed benzodiazepines looked like when they did not fully dissolve. I looked at the soup, then I looked at Jasmine. She was watching me, her hands gripping her napkin. She was terrified. She knew what she was doing was evil, but she was too weak to stop it. "Dig in, Dad," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It is best when it is hot." I picked up my spoon. I stirred the gumbo slowly. I saw a small white speck swirl into the dark broth. "This looks delicious," I said. I lifted the spoon to my lips. I saw Brent lean forward, holding his breath. I put the spoon in my mouth, but I did not swallow. I held the liquid under my tongue. The taste was bitter, unmistakable. I reached for my napkin. I pretended to cough. "Excuse me," I said, pressing the thick cloth napkin to my mouth. "A bit spicy." I spit the liquid into the napkin and folded it quickly, keeping it in my hand. I took a sip of water to clear the taste. I repeated this process 4 times. Spoon to mouth, hold, cough, spit, fold. To them, it looked like I was eating. I watched them relax. Brent started talking about the weather, about the football game, pretending everything was normal while he waited for his father-in-law to lose consciousness. I decided it was time. I let my eyelids droop. I let my hand holding the spoon shake. I do not feel so good," I mumbled, slurring my words intentionally. "Dad," Jasmine asked, feigning concern. "What is wrong?" The room. It is spinning," I said. I stood up, knocking my chair back. I grabbed the edge of the table. I looked at Brent with wide, confused eyes. "Why is the ceiling moving?" I shouted. Then I let my legs give out. I collapsed onto the floor, dragging the tablecloth with me. Dishes crashed. The candle holder fell over. I lay on the rug, twitching slightly, keeping my eyes half open. "Oh my God," Jasmine screamed. She sounded genuinely scared, now perhaps realizing the reality of what they had done. "He is having a breakdown," Brent yelled. "Call Dr. Eris, now." He did not call 911. He called the private doctor. That confirmed everything. I lay on the floor staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I slowed my breathing. I let my jaw go slack. I was an old man lost in the fog of his own mind. Or so they thought. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Dr. Eris had arrived suspiciously fast. He must have been waiting around the corner. He came into the dining room carrying a black medical bag. He was a small man with nervous eyes and expensive cologne. He knelt beside me. "Can you hear me, Mr. Hayes?" he asked, shining a penlight into my eyes. I stared past him. I looked at the empty air above his head. "Etta," I whispered. My voice was raspy. "Etta, is that you?" "The train is coming, Etta. We have to move the cargo." I saw Brent smirk. This was exactly what he wanted. "He is hallucinating," Brent said, standing over us. "He has been like this for weeks, talking to dead people, forgetting where he is. Tonight he became violent. He threw the dishes. We are scared, doctor. We do not know what to do." Dr. Eris checked my pulse. He did not take a blood sample. He did not check for toxins. He just nodded. "It appears to be an acute episode of advanced dementia," Dr. Eris said, pulling a clipboard from his bag. "He is disoriented, delusional, and physically unstable. In my professional opinion, he is no longer capable of making decisions for his own welfare." He stood up and looked at Brent. "I can sign the emergency committal papers now. This will allow you to transport him to the facility immediately, and it will serve as the primary evidence for your competency hearing on Friday." "Do it," Brent said. "Get him out of here." I lay there listening to the scratch of the pen on paper. That sound was louder to me than the crashing dishes. It was the sound of my freedom being signed away. But they had made a mistake, a massive, arrogance-fueled mistake. By skipping the hospital and using a private doctor to falsify a diagnosis, they had just committed medical malpractice and fraud. And the digital recorder in my pocket, which I had turned on before I entered the room, had captured every word. I closed my eyes and let out a long moan. "Etta," I cried out one last time. "Save me." Jasmine started to cry. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered. I did not answer. I let 2 paramedics who arrived shortly after lift me onto a stretcher. As they wheeled me out of the house, I saw Brent holding the signed papers like a trophy. He winked at the doctor. I let them load me into the ambulance. I let them strap me down. As the doors closed, shutting out the sight of my treacherous family, I stopped acting. My face went cold and hard. "You want a war, Brent?" I thought, as the siren began to wail. "You just declared it. But you forgot one thing. You do not send a soldier to a prison. You send him to a barracks to regroup." The ambulance ride was the first quiet moment I had in days. I was going to a mental facility. Most men would be terrified. I was calculating. I had 48 hours until the hearing. I had a lawyer, I had a recording, and now I had proof that they were willing to kill me to get what they wanted. I looked at the paramedic. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice clear and steady. The paramedic jumped. He looked at me surprised by my sudden clarity. "Oak Creek facility, sir. Just relax. The doctor said you were confused." "I am not confused, son," I said, staring at the metal ceiling of the ambulance. "I have never been more lucid in my life." I closed my eyes again, preparing for the final battle. Friday was coming, and on Friday, the devil was going to learn that he had knocked on the wrong door. They locked the door from the outside. I heard the click of the deadbolt sliding into place, followed by the heavy footsteps of my son-in-law walking away. They had put me in the guest room on the first floor, the one with the bars on the windows that Brent had installed for security, but which now served as the bars of my cell. They thought they had trapped a confused old man. They forgot they were dealing with a man who had spent 40 years maintaining heavy machinery. A lock is just a mechanical suggestion to a man who knows how things are put together. I waited until the house was silent. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 2 times. The darkness was total. I did not turn on the lamp. I did not need light to work. My hands knew the shape of metal better than they knew the shape of my own face. I walked to the door. It was a solid oak door, one of the few quality things in this house, but the hinges were standard residential grade. And because this was an old house that had been renovated cheaply, the door frame had shifted slightly over the years, leaving a gap on the side. I knelt down. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin, stiff piece of wire I had taken from a spiral notebook earlier that day. I flattened it out. I slid it into the hinge barrel. I felt the resistance of the pin. I pushed. It did not move. It was painted over with layers of white latex paint. I took a deep breath. I applied steady pressure. I used the heel of my work boot to tap the wire gently, muffling the sound with a thick wool sock. Pop. The first pin slid up an inch. I pulled it out with my fingers. I repeated the process for the middle hinge and then the bottom one. I gripped the door handle. I lifted the heavy wood slightly to clear the carpet and pulled the door toward me from the hinge side. It swung open silently, leaving the lock engaged on the other side. I stepped into the hallway. The house was breathing slowly, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the wind rattling the shutters. I was a ghost in my own home. I did not leave immediately. I walked to the living room. I saw the papers on the coffee table, the application for emergency guardianship, the medical report signed by Dr. Aris. They were all there, ready for the morning. I resisted the urge to tear them up. Destroying the evidence would only make them desperate. I needed them confident. I needed them to walk into that courtroom thinking they had already won. I slipped out the back door, using a spare key I had hidden under a loose brick in the patio 5 years ago. The night air was cold and sharp. It smelled of wet pine needles and impending rain. I walked through the backyard, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the motion sensor lights Brent had installed but never adjusted correctly. I walked 3 blocks to the corner of Elm and Main. There was an old phone booth there, a relic from a time before cell phones that the city had forgotten to remove. I stood there in the dark, shivering slightly in my thin flannel shirt. 2 minutes later, a pair of headlights swept across the pavement. A black Bentley rolled to a stop at the curb. The engine purred so quietly it was almost silent. The back door opened. I slid into the leather seat. The interior smelled of expensive cigars and old money. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes." The man sitting next to me was waiting. He was 70 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen every legal trick in the book. Samuel Cohen, my personal attorney for 30 years and one of the few men on earth who knew the truth about my portfolio. "Hello, Sam," I said, rubbing my hands together to warm them. "Thank you for coming." Cohen looked at me. He looked at my rough clothes, my tired face, and the dirt under my fingernails. He shook his head slowly. "You look terrible, Eldridge," he said bluntly. "How much longer are you going to let them do this to you?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the digital voice recorder. I placed it on the center console between us. "This is the evidence," I said. "Dr. Eris falsifying a diagnosis, Brent and Jasmine conspiring to commit fraud. It is all there." Cohen picked up the recorder. He turned it over in his hands like it was a diamond. "This is enough," he said. "We can go to the police right now. We can have Brent arrested before breakfast. We can freeze his accounts and have Dr. Eris' license revoked by noon. Why wait? Why let them drag you into a courtroom and humiliate you?" I looked out the tinted window at the sleeping city. I saw the lights of the skyscrapers in the distance. Some of those lights were on in buildings I owned. "Because an arrest is too easy, Sam," I said. "If I stop them now, they will play the victim. They will say it was a misunderstanding. They will say they were just trying to help a sick old man. Jasmine will cry, and the world will forgive her." I turned back to Cohen. "I need them to say it under oath, Sam. I need them to stand before a judge and lie. I need the record to show exactly who they are when they think no one is watching. I want the betrayal to be absolute, so the justice can be absolute." Cohen sighed. He opened a silver flask and poured a small amount of amber liquid into a cup. He handed it to me. "You are a stubborn man, Eldridge," he said, "but you are right. Judge Vance is presiding. I spoke to him. He is expecting a show, but he does not know the twist yet." I took a sip of the brandy. It burned in a good way. "Make sure the transfer documents are ready," I said. "When the gavel comes down, I want to be able to sign the Colton Plaza land over to the community trust immediately. I do not want Brent to own a single grain of sand by the time I walk out of that courthouse." "It is already done," Cohen said. "And the stock purchase. We acquired 51% of Brent Architecture Firm through shell companies this afternoon. You are effectively his boss. He just does not know it yet." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "Does he still have the company car?" I asked. "The Porsche." Cohen nodded. "Yes." "Repo it," I said. "During the hearing. I want him to walk home." Cohen laughed, a dry chuckle. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" "No, Sam," I said, and my voice dropped to a whisper. "I am not enjoying it. That woman is my daughter. This is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But a surgeon has to cut to cure, and the rot runs deep." I handed the cup back to him. "I have to go back." Cohen looked alarmed. "Back? Are you insane? Stay at my hotel. We will walk into court together in the morning. If I am not in that room when they unlock the door, I am a fugitive," I said. "I am a senile old man who wandered off. That gives them credibility. But if I am there, sleeping in my bed when they come for me, then I am the victim. I am the helpless father they are persecuting." I opened the car door. The cold air hit me again. "See you in court, counselor," I said. I walked back into the darkness. The walk back felt longer. My legs were aching. My heart was heavy. I was walking back into a prison voluntarily. I slipped back into the house. The silence was still unbroken. I went to the guest room door. I lifted the heavy oak door and slid the hinges back onto the pins. It was difficult work. I had to align them perfectly by feel. I sweat profusely. My arm throbbed. But I did it. I tapped the pins back down. I stepped inside the room and pushed the door closed. The latch clicked. I was locked in again. I lay down on the bed. I did not take off my boots. I stared at the ceiling. They thought I was trapped. They thought the lock on the door was keeping me in. They were wrong. I was not a prisoner waiting for a verdict. I was a hunter, sitting in a blind waiting for the sun to rise. I was a spider sitting in the center of a web that they had spent years building for themselves. I closed my eyes and visualized the morning. I visualized the look on Brent's face. I visualized Jasmine tears. I visualized the end of their world. "Come on, Brent," I whispered to the empty room. "Come and get me." The sun began to creep through the bars of the window, painting stripes of light across the floor. I folded my hands over my chest and waited. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The sun was barely up when I heard the key turn in the lock. I had been awake for hours, sitting in the armchair by the window, watching the light slowly reveal the dust motes dancing in the air. I had reinstalled the door hinges perfectly during the night, so there was no sign that I had ever left the room. To them, I was just a prisoner waiting for his sentence. To me, I was a judge waiting to deliver the verdict. The door opened slowly. It was Jasmine. She was not wearing her usual designer armor. She was wearing a soft, oversized sweater and leggings, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. She looked vulnerable. For a second, just a split second, my heart softened. I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching her teddy bear. I wanted to ask her if she was okay. I wanted to be her father. But then I saw what she was holding in her hands. It was a blue folder, the kind legal documents come in. She walked into the room and closed the door behind her. She did not look me in the eye immediately. She busied herself with placing a tray of breakfast on the small table. Toast, coffee, scrambled eggs. It was the first hot meal they had offered me in 2 days. It was the meal of a condemned man. "Dad," she said softly. Her voice cracked. "I brought you some breakfast." "Thank you, Jasmine," I said, keeping my voice level. She sat on the edge of the bed, wringing her hands. She started to cry. It was a quiet weeping, the kind that invites sympathy. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I hate this, Dad," she sobbed. "I hate seeing you like this. Dr. Aris says you are getting worse. He says the confusion is going to turn into aggression soon. We are just so scared." I took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm. I watched her performance. It was good. If I did not know about the conversation under the floorboards, I might have believed her. "What is in the folder, Jasmine?" I asked. She sniffled and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "It is just some paperwork, Dad, for the facility. Oak Creek is a beautiful place. They have gardens. They have activities. You will have your own room with a view of the lake. It is not like a hospital. It is like a vacation resort." She opened the folder and pushed it across the table toward me. "We just need your signature on the consent form," she said. "Since the court hearing is tomorrow, this will just show the judge that you are willing to go, that you understand you need help. It will make everything easier." I looked at the document. It was titled Voluntary Admission and Transfer of Asset Management. It was not just an admission form. It was a total surrender. By signing this, I would be agreeing that I was mentally unfit, and I would be granting Brent and Jasmine immediate power of attorney over my affairs until the court ruled otherwise. "And if I sign this?" I asked. Jasmine reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was cold. "If you sign this, we can stop fighting, Dad. We can be a family again. And," she paused for effect, "and you can see Leo, my grandson." They had kept him away from me for months, telling him I was sick, telling him Grandpa was dangerous. "You will let me see Leo?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Of course," she said, squeezing my hand. "He misses you. He asks about you every day. Once you are settled at Oak Creek, we will bring him to visit every weekend. I promise." She was using an innocent child as a bargaining chip. She was dangling my love for my grandson in front of me like a carrot on a stick to lure me into a trap. I pulled my hand away. I needed to know the truth. I needed to know if there was any part of my daughter left inside this stranger. I looked at the pen she had placed on top of the paper. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen, one of Brent's. "I have a question, Jasmine," I said. She nodded eagerly, pushing the pen closer. "Anything, Dad." I looked straight into her eyes. I let the silence hang in the room for a long moment. I wanted her to feel the weight of it. "If I do not sign this," I said slowly, "if I refuse to go to this facility, if I say that I want to stay here in my own home, will you still take care of me?" Jasmine froze. The tears stopped instantly. The vulnerability vanished from her face like mist burning off in the morning sun. Her eyes hardened. She sat up straighter. "What kind of question is that?" she asked sharply. "It is a simple question," I said. "I am your father. I raised you. I paid for your school. I walked you down the aisle. If I am sick as you say I am, do you not have a duty to care for me? Or is your love conditional on this signature?" She stood up. The soft sweater suddenly looked like a costume she was ready to shed. She looked down at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. "Duty." She spat the word out. "You talk about duty. What about my duty to my husband, to my future? You are an anchor around our necks, Dad. You contribute nothing. You sit in that shed collecting junk while we struggle to pay the bills for this house that you claim is yours." She leaned over the table, her face inches from mine. "You want the truth?" she hissed. "Fine. No, I will not take care of you. I do not have an obligation to ruin my life nursing a useless old man who is too stubborn to die. If you do not sign that paper, we will go to court tomorrow, and we will destroy you. We will testify that you are violent. We will testify that you threatened Leo. We will have you locked up in a state ward where the nurses steal your food and the walls smell of urine. Is that what you want?" I sat there stunned by the violence of her words. Useless, stubborn, dangerous. This was it. This was the moment the cord was cut. The daughter I loved was gone, consumed by greed and the poison of her husband's ambition. I felt a deep sorrow settle in my chest, but alongside it there was a cold steel resolve. I had given her a chance. I had given her an exit ramp. She had chosen to crash. "Okay," I said softly. "You win." Jasmine let out a breath she had been holding. Her face relaxed back into a mask of faux concern. "It is for the best, Dad," she said, smoothing her hair. "You will see. You will be happier there." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the signature line. Beneficiary signature. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed my entire life. Jasmine knew this. She had watched me write birthday cards and sign permission slips for 18 years. But she was not watching me now. She was watching the paper. She was watching the prize. I shifted the pen to my left hand. My hand shook. It was not acting. It was genuinely difficult to hold the pen correctly. I put the nib to the paper. I wrote my name, Eldridge Hayes. The letters were jagged. The spacing was wrong. The slant was backwards. It looked nothing like my elegant sweeping signature that was on file at the bank and on the original deeds. It looked like the scrawl of a man under extreme duress, or a man who was having a stroke, or a forgery. I finished the last letter and let the pen drop onto the table. "There," I said. "It is done." Jasmine snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. She stared at it. She did not look at the quality of the handwriting. She did not notice that it was practically illegible. She only saw that the line was filled. "Thank you," she breathed. She was already moving toward the door, clutching the folder to her chest like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I will go tell Brent," she said. "We will pack your things. The car will be here in an hour." She did not say, "I love you." She did not say, "I am sorry." She just turned her back on me and walked out. I heard her running down the hall. I heard her shout to Brent. He signed it. We got it. I sat back in the chair and finished my coffee. It was cold now, but it tasted sweet. They thought they had a confession. They thought they had a voluntary surrender. What they actually had was physical evidence of coercion. A forensic handwriting expert would take one look at that signature and testify that it was either forced or written by someone else. And combined with the recording of her threat to throw me in a state ward, that piece of paper was not a ticket to a nursing home. It was a ticket to prison. I stood up and walked to the window. A black sedan was pulling into the driveway. The transport service. I was ready to go. I would play their game for 24 more hours. I would let them take me to Oak Creek. I would let them think they had discarded me, because tomorrow I was coming back, and I was bringing the storm with me. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. It was a smell I knew well from my days negotiating contracts, but today it turned my stomach. I sat at the defendant table alone. My lawyer Cohen was in the room, but he was sitting in the back row of the gallery, disguised as a disinterested observer reading a newspaper. I had ordered him to stay there. I wanted the court to see me as a solitary figure, a confused old man with no friends and no resources, fighting a hopeless battle against his loving family. The bailiff called the case. In the matter of the mental competency of Eldridge Hayes, Brent attorney stood up. He was a man named Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my truck, and a smile that looked like it had been sharpened with a razor blade. He walked toward the bench with the confidence of a predator who knows the prey is already trapped. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth and practiced, "we are here today with heavy hearts. No child wants to take away a parent independence, but in this case, we have no choice. Mr. Hayes is no longer the man he used to be. He has become a danger to himself and to others." I sat with my hands folded in my lap. I looked at the table. I did not look at the judge. I did not look at Brent. I played the part of the broken man perfectly. Sterling walked back to his table and picked up a large cardboard box. He carried it to the evidence table like it contained a bomb. "We have evidence, Your Honor," Sterling said. "Evidence of a severe decline into alcoholism and violent paranoia." He reached into the box and pulled out a bottle. It was a cheap plastic bottle of vodka, empty and crushed. Then he pulled out another, and another. He lined them up on the table. 6 empty bottles of the cheapest liquor money could buy. "These were found in Mr. Hayes' living quarters," Sterling said solemnly. "Hidden under his mattress, buried in his toolbox. This explains the erratic behavior, the outbursts, the inability to maintain hygiene. The man is not just suffering from dementia, he is drowning in addiction." I looked at the bottles. I had never touched vodka in my life. I was a bourbon man, and I only drank 1 glass on Sunday evenings. These bottles were trash Brent had probably fished out of a dumpster behind a frat house, or bought just for this occasion. It was a lazy lie, but looking at the judge who was flipping through the file, I could see it was working. Sterling continued painting his portrait of me. He described a man who screamed at imaginary enemies, a man who forgot how to use a toilet, a man who had threatened to burn the house down because he thought the government was watching him. It was a masterpiece of fiction. If I did not know who I was, I might have believed him myself. Brent sat next to him, shaking his head sadly, acting the part of the concerned son-in-law who had tried everything. I felt a cold rage burning in my chest, not because of the lies I expected, but because of the laziness of them. They did not even bother to invent a believable story. They just took every stereotype of a poor old black man and threw it at the wall hoping it would stick. They reduced 40 years of hard work and discipline to a caricature of a drunk in a shed. I kept my face blank. I let my shoulders slump. I let them think they were burying me. Then came the dagger. "I called Jasmine Hayes Colton to the stand," Sterling announced. My daughter stood up. She was dressed in a modest navy blue dress. She wore no jewelry. She had even worn flat shoes to make herself look smaller, more vulnerable. She walked to the witness stand, clutching a tissue in her hand. She swore to tell the truth, so help her God. I wondered if lightning would strike the roof of the courthouse. Sterling approached her gently. "Mrs. Colton, can you tell the court why you filed this petition?" Jasmine took a deep breath. Her chin trembled. She dabbed at her eyes with the tissue before she even spoke. "I love my father," she said, her voice breaking. "I love him so much. That is why this is so hard. But I cannot watch him suffer anymore." She looked at me then. For the first time, she looked me in the eyes. I saw the tears running down her cheeks. They were real tears, but she was not crying for me. She was crying for the guilt she was trying to bury. "Tell us about the incident on Tuesday," Sterling prompted. Jasmine sniffled. He did not know who I was. We were eating dinner and he started screaming. He thought the soup was poison. He threw the bowl at the wall. He called me Etta. That was my mother name. She died 10 years ago. She paused to let the sob escape. He terrified my son Leo. My little boy is afraid to go into the backyard because Grandpa screams at the birds. I just want him to be safe. I want him to get the help he needs. Oak Creek is a wonderful facility. They can take care of him in a way I just cannot anymore. The courtroom was silent. The stenographer typed rhythmically. The judge looked at me with pity. A sad case. Just another tragedy of aging. Sterling turned to the judge. "Your Honor, you have the medical report from Dr. Aris confirming the diagnosis. You have the testimony of the daughter. You have the physical evidence of substance abuse. We ask that you grant immediate, permanent conservatorship to Mrs. Colton so she can manage her father affairs and get him the medical attention he desperately needs." It was over. The trap had snapped shut. They had painted me as a monster and themselves as saints. I sat there and I felt a strange sense of calm. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:45. Suddenly, the side door behind the judge's bench opened. The court clerk, a young woman with glasses, hurried in. She whispered something to the presiding judge. The judge listened, frowned, and then nodded. He picked up his gavel. "Due to a family emergency, I must recuse myself from the remainder of the morning docket," the judge announced. "A replacement judge has been assigned and is ready to step in immediately. Court will recess for 2 minutes." He stood up and left the room. The tension in the room shifted. Brent leaned over to Sterling. "What does this mean?" Brent whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "Is this a problem?" Sterling waved his hand dismissively. "Not at all. It is just a procedural change. The case is a slam dunk. The testimony is already on record. The new judge will just review the file and rubber stamp the order. We are fine. Relax, Brent. In 10 minutes, you will own the land." Brent smiled. He loosened his tie slightly. He looked at me and winked. I did not wink back. I watched the door. 2 minutes later, the bailiff shouted, "All rise." The door opened. A figure stepped out. He was tall. He walked with a slight limp, the result of shrapnel in his left leg from a grenade in 1971. He had broad shoulders that even his black robe could not hide. His hair was gray, cut short in a military style. His face was like carved granite, stern and unyielding. It was Judge Vance. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. It was Cohen. He knew. Vance walked up the steps to the bench. He did not look at the lawyers. He did not look at the gallery. He sat down and opened the file in front of him. He put on his reading glasses. He read in silence for a long time. The only sound in the room was the humming of the air conditioner. Sterling cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may." "Sit down, counsel," Vance said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel rolling inside a cement mixer. "I am reviewing the evidence." Vance flipped through the pages. He looked at the medical report signed by Dr. Aris. He lingered on it for a moment, his brow furrowing. Then he looked at the photos of the vodka bottles. Finally, he looked up. His eyes swept across the room. They passed over Sterling. They passed over Brent, who was now looking a little less confident. They passed over Jasmine, who was still clutching her tissue. Then they landed on me. I was sitting straight up now. My shoulders were back. I was not looking at the floor anymore. I was looking directly at him. Vance's eyes widened slightly, just a fraction. His hand, which was holding a pen, froze in midair. He paled, visible even under the dark courtroom lights. He leaned forward. He whispered something that the microphone barely caught. "My God." He took off his glasses. His hand was shaking. Is that really him?" Sterling stood up, confused. "Your Honor, is something wrong?" Vance ignored him. He was staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. 20 years ago, Judge Vance had been Private Vance, and I had been Sergeant Hayes. I had carried him 2 miles through a jungle with a bullet in my shoulder while he bled out from that leg wound. I had paid for his law school tuition anonymously when he came home broken and broke. I had followed his career from the shadows, ensuring he had the support he needed to become the man he was today. He had not seen me in decades. I had aged. I had grown a beard. I dressed like a pauper, but he knew the eyes. You never forget the eyes of the man who saved your life. Brent leaned toward his lawyer again. "Why is he looking at him like that?" Brent hissed. "I do not know," Sterling whispered back. "But do not worry. This judge has a reputation for being tough on addicts. He hates weakness. This works in our favor." I almost laughed. They thought Vance was looking at a weak addict. They did not know he was looking at his commanding officer. Vance slowly closed the file. He placed his hands flat on the desk. He took a deep breath, composing himself. "Mr. Hayes," Vance said. His voice was different now. It was respectful. It was gentle. "Would the defendant please stand?" I stood up. I did not need the table for support. I stood at attention. Brent snickered. "Look at him, Sterling," he whispered. "He thinks he is in the army. What a clown." Vance heard it. His eyes snapped to Brent. The look he gave my son-in-law could have stripped paint off a wall. "Silence in my courtroom," Vance roared. Brent shrank back in his seat. Vance turned back to me. "Sir Vance said," using a term of address usually reserved for superior officers, not defendants. "Sir, do you wish to speak on your own behalf before I make a ruling?" I looked at Jasmine. She was staring at the judge, confused by his tone. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was clear. The raspy mumble of the senile old man was gone. "I would like to make a statement, and I would like to introduce my legal counsel." Sterling laughed. "Legal counsel, Your Honor. The man is indigent. He has no lawyer unless the state appointed one." I turned my head toward the back of the room. "Mr. Cohen," I said, "if you would be so kind." Samuel Cohen stood up from the back bench. He folded his newspaper. He picked up his leather briefcase. He walked down the center aisle, his shoes clicking rhythmically on the floor. He opened the gate and walked to my table. Sterling dropped his pen. Every lawyer in the state knew Samuel Cohen. He was the shark that ate other sharks. He did not represent indigent old men. He represented corporations. He represented billionaires. Cohen placed his briefcase on the table next to the empty vodka bottles. He looked at Sterling and smiled. "Good morning, Your Honor," Cohen said. "Samuel Cohen representing Mr. Eldridge Hayes. We are ready to proceed, and we have a few exhibits of our own we would like to present." I looked at Brent. His face had gone gray. He looked at Jasmine. She had stopped crying. The trap was sprung. The door was locked. And now the real trial was about to begin. The silence that followed Cohen's introduction was heavy. It hung in the air like smoke. Sterling, the lawyer, looked at Cohen like a dog that had just realized it was barking at a wolf. But the real show was about to begin. It was my turn. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the linoleum floor, a harsh sound that made Jasmine flinch. I did not use the table for support this time. I did not tremble. I stood up with a fluidity that belied my 68 years. I looked down at my clothes. The dirty canvas jacket, the stained flannel shirt, the costume of the defeated. It had served its purpose. It had hidden the man I was, so the parasites could reveal who they were. But now it was time to shed the skin. I reached for the top button of the canvas jacket. My fingers were steady. I undid it. Then the next, and the next. Brent snickered. "What is he doing now, Sterling?" he whispered loudly. "Is he stripping? This is ridiculous." I ignored him. I let the heavy, dirty jacket slide off my shoulders. It hit the floor with a thud. Underneath, I was wearing a charcoal gray suit, but not just any suit. It was a bespoke three-piece suit cut from Italian wool, tailored by a man in London who only accepts clients by referral. It fit me like a second skin. It emphasized the width of my shoulders and the straightness of my back. I adjusted my silk tie. It was a deep crimson red, the color of power. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles. I put them on. The transformation was instant and absolute. The hunched-over, mumbling old man was gone. In his place stood a titan of industry, a man who commanded boardrooms, a man who had built a fortune from dirt. I stood at parade rest, my feet shoulder-width apart, my hands clasped behind my back, my chin raised. It was the posture of a sergeant major, the posture of a man who gives orders, not one who takes them. I turned my head slowly to the left. I looked at the prosecution table. Jasmine was in the middle of a giggle, sharing a joke with her husband about my senility. The laugh died in her throat. It turned into a choking sound. Her eyes traveled up and down my figure. She looked at the cut of the suit. She looked at the polish on my shoes. She looked at the gold watch on my wrist, which I had slipped on while my back was turned. She did not recognize me. For a terrifying second, she looked at her own father and saw a stranger, a powerful, dangerous stranger. Brent was staring too, but he was staring at the suit. He was an architect. He knew design. He knew quality. He saw the hand stitching on the lapel. He saw the way the fabric draped. His brain was trying to process the impossible math. How could a man who lived in a shed afford a suit that cost more than Brent's car? His brow furrowed. He leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. The arrogance was leaking out of him, replaced by a creeping dread. But the most important reaction was not at the tables. It was on the bench. I turned my gaze forward. I looked directly at Judge Vance. He had dropped his pen. It rolled across the mahogany desk and fell to the floor with a small clatter, but he did not notice. He was gripping the edge of the bench so hard his knuckles were white. Vance was a man of stone. He was known for his lack of emotion. He had sentenced men to life in prison without blinking, but now he looked like he had seen a ghost. He was staring at the lapel of my suit. Specifically, he was staring at the small pin I had attached there. It was a silver star with a red, white, and blue ribbon, the Silver Star Medal. Vance's breath hitched. He took off his reading glasses, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He leaned forward, squinting as if trying to bring a memory into focus. The courtroom was frozen. The stenographer had stopped typing. The bailiff had his hand on his belt, unsure of what was happening. Vance's lips moved. At first, no sound came out. Then a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. My God. He pushed his chair back. He stood up. This was a breach of protocol. Judges do not stand for defendants, but Vance was not looking at a defendant anymore. He walked around the side of the bench. He limped slightly, his left leg stiff. I knew exactly which bullet had caused that limp, because I was the one who had tied the tourniquet. He stopped 10 feet away from me. He looked into my eyes. He looked past the wrinkles. He looked past the gray hair. He saw the eyes of the man who had dragged him through a rice paddy in 1971, while mortar shells turned the world to fire. "Is that really you?" he asked. His voice was thick with emotion. "Is that really him?" Sterling jumped up. Your Honor, I object. This is highly irregular. The defendant is— Sit down, Vance roared, without looking away from me. He took another step closer. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He saw the scar on my neck, the one I got from the same explosion that took his leg. Sergeant Hayes, he whispered. I did not smile. I did not cry. I maintained my bearing. I looked him in the eye with the cold steel gaze that had kept 20 men alive in the jungle. I nodded once, a sharp military nod. Hello, Judge Vance, I said. My voice was deep, resonant, and commanding. It filled the room, bouncing off the walls. It has been a long time. Private Vance. The use of his old military rank hit him like a physical blow. It stripped away his robes. It stripped away his title. In that moment, he was just a young, scared soldier, and I was the leader who had promised to get him home. Vance's eyes filled with tears. He did not care who was watching. He did not care about the court reporter. He snapped his heels together. He straightened his back, ignoring the pain in his leg. And right there in the middle of the courtroom, the presiding judge saluted the defendant. It was a sharp, crisp salute, a salute of absolute respect. I returned the salute, slow, precise. At ease, Private, I said softly. Vance lowered his hand. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 30 years. I thought you were dead, he said, wiping his eyes. The records said— The records were wrong, I said. I came back. I built a life. I built a business. And I raised a family. I turned my head slightly to glare at Jasmine and Brent, or at least I tried to. Vance followed my gaze. He looked at Brent. The look of warmth vanished from his face, instantly replaced by a fury that was terrifying to behold. He realized what was happening. He realized that this man, this hero who had saved his life, was the same man being accused of being a senile drunk by these vultures. He turned back to me. Sir Vance said, his voice shaking with rage. Are these the people? Are these the ones trying to commit you? Yes, I said calmly. They claim I am incompetent. They claim I am a burden. They claim I have nothing. Vance let out a dark laugh. Nothing. You have more honor in your little finger than they have in their entire lineage. He walked back to the bench. He did not sit down. He stood there, towering over the courtroom. He looked at Sterling. He looked at Brent. You have made a grave mistake, Vance said. His voice was low and dangerous. You came into my courtroom, and you tried to lie to me. But worst of all, you tried to dishonor a man who is a national hero. Brent stood up, his legs shaking. Your Honor, we did not know. He never told us. He lived in a shed. He lived where he chose to live, Vance shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. And you treated him like garbage. Vance turned to Cohen. Mr. Cohen, I assume you have the documentation to prove Mr. Hayes' financial status, since that seems to be the only thing these people care about. I do, Your Honor, Cohen said, stepping forward. And I believe the court will find that Mr. Hayes is not only competent, but he is likely the wealthiest person in this building. Vance nodded. Proceed, Mr. Cohen. I want to hear everything, and I want the record to show every single word. I sat back down. I crossed my legs. I adjusted my cufflink. I looked at Jasmine. She was pale as a sheet. She was gripping the railing in front of her. She looked at me, but she did not see her father anymore. She saw a stranger who had just turned her world upside down. I did not look away. I held her gaze until she was forced to look down. The ambush was over. The counterattack had begun, and unlike the jungle this time, I would show no mercy. The bailiff unlatched the swinging gate that separated the gallery from the well of the courtroom. Samuel Cohen walked through it with the casual confidence of a man entering his own living room. He placed his heavy leather briefcase on the defense table next to my crushed vodka bottles. The sound of the brass latches clicking open echoed in the silent room. Click. Click. It sounded like the cocking of a double-barreled shotgun. Sterling, the lawyer for my son-in-law, tried to regain control. He stood up, adjusting his expensive tie, which now looked like a noose around his neck. Your Honor, I must object again, Sterling stammered. Mr. Cohen is a corporate litigator who charges $1,000 an hour. The defendant is a destitute man living on a pension. Unless Mr. Cohen is working pro bono for charity, which seems unlikely given his reputation, I fail to see how Mr. Hayes has retained him. This is a farce. Cohen did not even look at Sterling. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward the court reporter. "I am not working pro bono," Mr. Sterling Cohen said. His voice was dry and devoid of emotion. "I am on a retainer, a very substantial retainer that has been paid monthly for the last 30 years. And if you are wondering about the source of those funds, I suggest you look at the screen." Cohen nodded to his paralegal, who had set up a projector in the corner of the room. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly. A beam of white light cut through the dust and hit the projection screen. A complex diagram appeared. It was a corporate structure chart, a pyramid of companies. At the bottom were dozens of small LLCs, real estate management firms, logistics companies, tech startups. Above them were mid-level holding companies, and at the very top of the pyramid was a single entity, Hayes Holdings. Cohen picked up a laser pointer. A red dot danced across the screen. "This, Your Honor, is the corporate structure of the largest private land ownership group in downtown Atlanta," Cohen explained. "It owns 12 office buildings, 3 shopping centers, and the majority of the undeveloped land in the warehouse district." He moved the red dot to the top of the pyramid, to the name listed as sole proprietor, Harrison Eldridge Hayes. A gasp went through the room. It started in the back row and rippled forward. Brent was staring at the screen. His mouth was open. His eyes were darting back and forth between the screen and me. He was doing the math. He was realizing that the man he had forced to sleep in a shed was worth more than the entire architecture firm he worked for. But the horror was just beginning. Cohen clicked a button on a remote. The slide changed. "This is a breakdown of the debt held by Colton Architecture and Design," Cohen said. "Specifically the construction loans for the proposed Colton Plaza project." The screen showed a loan document, a loan for $3.5 million. "As you can see," Cohen continued calmly, "the primary lender for this project is Atlanta First Commercial Bank, a regional bank that specializes in high-risk construction loans." Brent nodded slowly. He knew this. He had signed the papers. He did not see the trap yet. Cohen clicked the remote again. "And this," Cohen said, "is the ownership structure of Atlanta First Commercial Bank." The red dot landed on a familiar name, Hayes Holdings. The color drained from Brent's face so fast it looked like his blood had evaporated. He gripped the edge of the table. He looked at me. His eyes were wide with terror. "You own the bank," Brent whispered. I did not answer. I just stared at him. Cohen answered for me. "Mr. Hayes owns the holding company that owns the controlling interest in the bank," Cohen said, "which means Mr. Hayes effectively owns your debt. He owns your project. And because you used your personal residence as collateral for that loan, he effectively owns your house." Jasmine let out a small cry. She covered her mouth with her hand. She looked at the house keys sitting on the table in front of her. The keys she had denied me. The keys she had used to lock me out. They were not her keys anymore. They never had been. Sterling sank into his chair. He realized he was not fighting a guardianship case. He was fighting a hostile takeover. And he had brought a knife to a nuclear war. "But we are not here to discuss real estate," Cohen said, turning off the projector. "We are here to discuss the alleged incompetence of my client." Cohen walked back to the table. He picked up the blue folder that Jasmine had forced me to sign the day before. He held it up with 2 fingers, like it was a piece of contaminated waste. "The petitioners claim that Mr. Hayes voluntarily signed this document, admitting his need for institutional care," Cohen said. "They claim he signed it of his own free will, in a moment of lucidity." Cohen walked to the witness stand. He placed the document in front of Jasmine. "Mrs. Colton, is this the document you witnessed your father sign yesterday morning?" Jasmine looked at the paper. She nodded. Her confidence was gone. She was trembling. "Yes," she whispered. "And you testified earlier that he signed it with his right hand, is that correct?" Cohen asked. Jasmine hesitated. She looked at Brent for help. But Brent was staring at the floor, engaging in a silent panic attack. I think so," Jasmine said. "I mean, he just signed it." I was watching him. Cohen smiled. It was a shark smile. "Interesting," Cohen said. "Because Mr. Hayes has been right-handed since birth. His military records confirm it. His employment records confirm it. Every check he has ever signed for 30 years confirms it." Cohen pulled another document from his briefcase. It was the original deed to the house. "This is the deed to the property signed 10 years ago," Cohen said, showing it to the judge. Notice the signature, fluid, slanted to the right, firm pressure. He picked up the consent form. Now look at this signature. Jagged, slanted to the left, shaky. He turned to Jasmine. Mrs. Colton, do you know why a man who is right-handed would sign a legal document with his left hand? Jasmine stammered. Maybe his arthritis was hurting. Or, Cohen interrupted, his voice rising slightly, or maybe he did it on purpose. Maybe he did it to signal distress. A distress signal that you were too greedy to notice because you were so eager to lock him away. Sterling jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. Sustained, Judge Vance said, but his eyes were glued to the two signatures. He saw the difference. Any blind man could see it. We do not need to speculate, Cohen said, because Mr. Hayes is a man of foresight. He knew that his word would not be enough against the word of his beloved daughter, so he took precautions. Cohen turned to the bailiff. Your Honor, I would like to submit into evidence a video file recorded yesterday morning in the guest bedroom of the Colton residence. Judge Vance nodded. Proceed. Cohen plugged a small flash drive into the court laptop. The projector screen lit up again. The video was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed the guest room. It showed me sitting at the table. It showed Jasmine entering the room. The courtroom watched in silence as the scene played out. They heard her fake crying. They heard her manipulation. They heard her promise to let me see my grandson Leo only if I signed. Then came the moment of truth. The moment I asked the question, if I do not sign this, will you still take care of me? The audio filled the courtroom. Jasmine's voice rang out sharp and cruel. Number one, I will not take care of you. I do not have an obligation to ruin my life nursing a useless old man. If you do not sign that paper, we will go to court. We will testify that you are violent. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Jasmine was sobbing now, real ugly sobs. She buried her face in her hands. She knew, everyone knew. She had been stripped bare. Her cruelty, her greed, her lack of humanity was exposed for the world to see. Judge Vance looked at her. His expression was one of pure disgust. Is this how you treat a veteran? He asked softly. Is this how you treat a father? He did not wait for an answer. He turned to Sterling. Counselor, do you have any defense for this? Do you have any explanation for why your client threatened to perjure herself in my courtroom? Sterling stood up. He gathered his papers. He closed his briefcase. Your Honor, he said quietly, I would like to request a recess to discuss a plea deal with my clients. I was not aware of these recordings. I cannot defend this. Denied. Vance slammed his gavel down. The sound cracked like a gunshot. There will be no recess. There will be no deals. We are going to finish this now. Vance looked at me. He nodded. Mr. Cohen, do you have anything else? Just one more thing, Your Honor, Cohen said. He walked over to Brent. He stood right in front of him. Since we have established that Mr. Hayes is competent, and since we have established that the consent form was obtained under duress, I would like to address the matter of the assets. Cohen reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys. He placed them on the table in front of Brent. My client would like to repossess the company vehicle, Cohen said. The Porsche Panamera parked in the lot outside. Since Hayes Holdings is now the majority shareholder of your firm, and since you have been terminated for gross misconduct, effective 5 minutes ago via an emergency board vote, you are no longer authorized to drive it. Brent looked at the keys. He looked at me. You fired me, he whispered. I spoke for the first time since the video played. I did not fire you, Brent, I said. You fired yourself the moment you threw my toolbox into the rain. A man who does not respect the tools does not deserve to build the house. I looked at the judge. I am ready for your ruling, Your Honor. Judge Vance adjusted his robes. He looked at the family that had tried to destroy me. Stand up, he ordered them. Jasmine and Brent stood up. They looked small. They looked defeated, but I felt no joy, only a deep, hollow sadness. I had won the war, but I had lost my family. And yet as I looked at the American flag standing in the corner behind the judge, I knew I had done the right thing. Some roots are rotten, and if you do not cut them out, they will kill the whole tree. I took a deep breath. I was ready for the end. Judge Vance did not just dismiss the case, he incinerated it. He picked up his gavel and held it suspended in the air for a moment like an executioner holding an axe. When he brought it down, the sound was final. It echoed off the wood paneling and settled into the bones of everyone in the room. "The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice," Vance announced. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "That means you cannot file this again. You cannot shop for another judge. You cannot try to trick another doctor. This matter is closed forever." He took off his reading glasses and leaned over the bench looking directly at Brent and Jasmine. "But I am not finished," Vance continued. "Based on the video evidence presented by the defense and the testimony regarding the forced signature, I am submitting a formal recommendation to the district attorney office. I want an immediate investigation into charges of elder abuse, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft." Sterling, the lawyer for my son-in-law, began to pack his briefcase with frantic speed. He wanted to be out of that room before the word investigation was fully spoken. He knew that sticking around meant risking his own license. He looked at Brent and whispered something that sounded like, "You are on your own," and moved toward the exit. Jasmine let out a small whimper. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide and filled with a terror I had never seen before. She was realizing that this was not just a lost lawsuit. This was prison time. This was a criminal record. This was the end of her social standing in Atlanta. I sat perfectly still. I did not smile. I did not gloat. A soldier does not dance on the grave of his enemy, especially when that enemy is his own flesh and blood. I just watched them crumble. Vance turned to the bailiff. "Please ensure the defendants do not leave the building until the officers arrive to take their statements," Vance ordered. But before the bailiff could even move, the sound of a cell phone vibrating against a hard surface broke the silence. It was a violent buzzing sound, like an angry hornet. It was Brent's phone lying on the table in front of him. Then it buzzed again, and again. A cascade of notifications. Brent looked down. He was dazed. He reached for the phone with a shaking hand. He unlocked the screen. I watched his face. I knew exactly what he was seeing. I knew because I had set the timer myself. Protocol 4 had just fully engaged. The first notification was from his personal bank. Account frozen due to suspicious activity. The second was from the corporate account of Colton Architecture. Insufficient funds for payroll. The third was an email from the city zoning board. Permit for Colton Plaza revoked by landowner request. Brent's eyes moved frantically across the screen. He scrolled down. He tapped on his banking app. He saw the numbers turning red. He saw the zero balances. He saw the credit limits plunging. "What is this?" he whispered. His voice was high and thin. He looked up at Cohen. "What did you do?" he screamed. Cohen did not even blink. He adjusted his glasses and spoke calmly. "We did not do anything, Mr. Colton. We simply secured the assets of Hayes Holdings. Since you were using my client land and my client money to fund your lifestyle and your business, we felt it was necessary to cut off the supply line. You are currently trespassing on financial ground that does not belong to you." Brent dropped the phone. It cracked on the table. He stood up. His hands were clawing at the air. The facade of the successful architect, the man of vision, the man of control, was gone. In his place was a desperate, cornered animal. He looked at me. He saw the man he had thrown out in the rain. He saw the man he had forced to kneel. And he saw that I was the one holding the leash. "You tricked me," Brent shouted. The veins in his neck bulged. "You planned this. You sat in that shed and you laughed at me." "I did not laugh, Brent," I said softly. "I wept." He did not hear me. The madness had taken over. The realization that he was ruined, that he was penniless, that he was about to be arrested, was too much for his fragile ego to handle. "It is mine," he screamed. "The plaza is mine. The house is mine. You are just a gardener. You are nobody." He lunged. It happened fast, but to me it looked like slow motion. Brent vaulted over the defense table. Papers flew into the air. He knocked over the pitcher of water. He was coming for my throat. Jasmine screamed. I did not flinch. I did not move. I did not need to. Before Brent could take 2 steps toward me, the bailiff, a man the size of a linebacker, tackled him mid-air. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Brent fought. He was thrashing and kicking, spitting curses at me. "I will kill you," he roared. "I will take it all back. It is mine." 2 more officers rushed in from the hallway. They pinned him down. I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut. "Get off me," Brent yelled, his face pressed against the courtroom floor. "Do you know who I am? I am Brent Colton. I am the lead architect of—" "You are under arrest," the bailiff shouted, forcing Brent's arms behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent." I stood up slowly. I walked over to where my son-in-law lay pinned to the ground. He looked up at me. His expensive suit was covered in dust. His nose was bleeding. His eyes were wild with hate and confusion. The courtroom was deadly silent. Even Jasmine had stopped crying. She was staring at her husband in horror. I looked down at him. I adjusted my cufflinks. I looked at the man who had tried to bury me. "Brent," I said. My voice was calm, cold, and devoid of pity. It was the voice of a judge delivering a death sentence. "You spent 5 years trying to build a legacy. You drew blueprints. You held galas. You bought Italian shoes." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But you forgot the most basic rule of architecture. You never build a heavy structure on a weak foundation." I leaned closer. "You built your life on my land. You built your business with my money. And you tried to build your future on my grave." Brent stopped struggling. He just stared at me, breathing heavily. I shook my head slowly. "You kicked me out of my own house because you said I did not fit the aesthetic. You said I was clutter. Well, Brent, I am cleaning up the clutter now." I stood up straight and looked him in the eye one last time. "You are a bad architect, son. And you are an even worse man. Get him out of here," Vance ordered from the bench. The officers hauled Brent to his feet. He did not scream anymore. The fight had left him. He looked at me with a look of pure shock. He finally understood the scale of his mistake. He had not just poked a bear. He had tried to steal the cave while the bear was still inside. As they dragged him out, the heavy doors swung shut behind him. The sound was like a book closing. I turned to look at Jasmine. She was sitting alone at the table. Her husband was gone. Her lawyer was gone. Her money was gone. She looked small. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. But I had no more words for her. Not yet. The legal battle was won. The financial battle was won. But the emotional battle, the one that mattered most, was just beginning. I turned to Cohen. "Let us go, Sam," I said. "I have a company to run." I walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. I walked with my head high, my steps echoing in the hallway. I walked out into the bright Atlanta sun. I was free. But as I stood on the courthouse steps, I realized that freedom has a taste, and today, it tasted like ashes. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung shut behind me, muffling the sounds of my son-in-law being dragged away in handcuffs. The hallway was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the heated chaos I had just left behind. My lawyer, Samuel Cohen, walked beside me, silently, carrying his briefcase like a shield. He knew better than to speak. He knew that a victory in court does not always feel like a victory in the heart. I walked toward the exit, my dress shoes clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I wanted to get to the car. I wanted to get to the silence of the Rolls-Royce, where I could finally let my guard down. But I did not make it to the door. "Dad, wait!" The voice was shrill, desperate, and broken. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. I heard the rapid staccato of high heels running across the floor. Then I felt a hand grab my arm. "Please, Dad, you cannot just walk away." I turned slowly. Jasmine was standing there. The polished socialite of the morning was gone. Her hair was coming loose from its bun. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines. She looked terrified. Not the terror of a child who has lost a parent, but the terror of a parasite that has lost its host. She gripped the sleeve of my Italian suit. Her knuckles were white. "Dad," she panted, breathless from running and crying. "You have to help me. They took Brent. They are going to seize everything. The accounts are frozen. My cards are declined. I cannot even call an Uber to get home." I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had pointed me toward the shed 2 days ago. "You do not have a home, Jasmine," I said, my voice low and steady. "The house is collateral for the loan Brent defaulted on. My bank will begin foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning." Jasmine's eyes widened. She shook her head frantically. No, you cannot do that. Where will I go? Where will Leo sleep? Dad, please. You are a millionaire. We saw the charts. You own half the city. You can fix this. Just write a check. Just tell the lawyers to stop. She was pleading for money. Even now, with her husband in a police car and her father revealed as a titan of industry, her first instinct was not to apologize for the betrayal. It was to ask for a bailout. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us. I can fix it, I admitted. I could write a check right now that would clear all the debts and buy you a new house. It would be easy for me. It would cost me less than I make in a week of interest. Jasmine's face lit up with hope, a pathetic, greedy hope. Yes, she breathed. Yes, please, Dad. I know we made mistakes, but we were desperate. Brent pressured me. I did not want to hurt you. We are family. Family helps each other. I looked her in the eye. Family, I repeated. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Jasmine watched my hand intently, expecting a checkbook. Instead, I pulled out a small, worn blue booklet. It was the savings account book, the birthday present she had thrown into the trash can 3 days ago. I had retrieved it that night, wiping off the cocktail sauce and smoothing out the bent corners. I held it out to her. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. Jasmine looked at the book. She looked confused. That is the savings book," she stammered. "The one you gave me." I nodded. "You threw it away," I said. "You called it garbage. You said you did not want my pennies." I pressed the book into her hand. She took it automatically. "I am giving it back to you," I said. Jasmine looked at the book, then at me. Her face fell. "Dad, this is nothing." "What is in here?" "A few $100s. I have legal fees. I have debt. I need real money." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and stern resolve. "Open it, Jasmine." She opened the book with trembling fingers. She flipped to the last page. She stared at the final entry. Her mouth dropped open. $50,000. It was not millions, but to a woman who currently had zero, it was a fortune. "This is not a few hundred," I said. "This is $50,000. I have been saving this for you since the day you graduated high school. I put aside a little bit every month from my pension. It was supposed to be a surprise for your 40th birthday, but I think you need it now." Jasmine stared at the number. Tears welled up in her eyes again. "Dad," she whispered. "Listen to me closely," I said, cutting her off. "This is not a bailout. This is a survival kit." I pointed to the book. "This money is enough to rent a modest apartment for 6 months. It is enough to buy food for you and Leo. It is enough to buy you a suit for job interviews." "Job interviews," she repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. "Yes," I said. "You are going to get a job, Jasmine. You have a degree. You are smart. You are going to work. You are going to wake up early. You are going to pay your own bills. You are going to learn what it costs to keep the lights on." "But 50,000 won't last long," she protested, panic creeping back into her voice. "What happens when it runs out?" "Then you will have earned more," I said simply. I leaned in closer, my voice hardening. "You called me a useless old man, Jasmine. You said I was a burden because I did not contribute. You measured a man's worth by the size of his bank account. Well, now you are going to learn the truth. Money is not worth. Character is worth. And right now your character is bankrupt." I stepped back. "I am giving you a fishing rod, Jasmine. I am not giving you a fish. If you want to survive, you will learn to catch your own dinner. And if you want to be my daughter again, you will learn to respect the people who cook it for you." Jasmine clutched the book to her chest. She looked like she was about to argue, to scream, to throw a tantrum. But something in my eyes stopped her. She saw the wall I had built. She saw that the ATM was closed permanently. "What about Brent?" she whispered. "Brent is facing 5 to 10 years in prison for fraud and elder abuse," I said. "I suggest you get a divorce lawyer. Use some of that 50,000. It will be the best investment you ever make." I turned to walk away. "Dad, wait," she cried out again. Will I see you again? Can Leo see you?" I paused. The mention of my grandson was the only thing that pierced my armor. "When you have a job," I said without turning around, "when you have an apartment that you paid for with your own money, when you can look me in the eye and tell me you understand why I did this, then bring Leo to my house, the real house, not the shed." I started walking again. "Until then, Jasmine, you are on your own." I walked through the revolving doors and out into the bright sunlight. The heat of the day hit me, but I felt cold inside. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was waiting at the curb. The driver, a man named Marcus who had been with me for 10 years, opened the rear door. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes," Marcus said. "Where to, sir?" "Take me to the office, Marcus," I said. "I have a lot of work to do." I slid into the back seat. The leather was soft and cool. The door closed with a heavy, solid thud, shutting out the noise of the city, shutting out the world. I looked through the tinted window. Jasmine had followed me out. She was standing on the sidewalk, clutching the blue bank book. She looked lost. She looked small against the backdrop of the massive courthouse. She was watching the car, watching her salvation drive away. I saw her shoulders shaking. She was crying. I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to tell Marcus to stop. I wanted to open the door and tell her to get in. I wanted to take her home and fix everything like I did when she was 6 years old and broke her doll. But I sat still. My hands gripped the armrest. If I helped her now, I would destroy her. If I saved her from the consequences of her actions, she would never grow. She would stay the same selfish, cruel person who tried to lock her father away. I was doing this because I loved her. And sometimes love means letting people fall so they can learn how to stand up. I watched her figure recede as the car pulled away. She became a small blue dot in the distance, and then she was gone. A single tear rolled down my cheek. I let it fall. I did not wipe it away. "It is done," I whispered to the empty car. Cohen, who was sitting in the front seat, looked back at me in the rearview mirror. He nodded once, respectful of my silence. The car glided through the streets of Atlanta. I was the winner. I had my dignity. I had my fortune. I had my freedom. But as I looked at the empty seat beside me, I realized the price of victory. I was the richest man in the city, and I was the loneliest man in the world. "Drive faster, Marcus," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Just drive." The car accelerated, merging into the traffic, leaving the wreckage of my family in the rearview mirror. The drive to the headquarters of Colton Architecture took 20 minutes. It was a glass and steel tower in the heart of the business district, a building that shouted success and modernity. For the last 5 years, this building had been a fortress. I was barely allowed to enter. I used to come here to drop off paperwork, or bring lunch to Brent when he was working late. I would stand in the lobby, wearing my work boots and my flannel shirt, waiting for permission to go up. I was the embarrassing relative, the stain on the company image. Today, the Rolls-Royce pulled right up to the front entrance. The doorman, a young man who had once told me I could not loiter on the sidewalk, rushed to open the car door. He saw the car, he saw the driver, and then he saw me. I stepped out onto the pavement. The heat radiating off the concrete felt different today. It felt like ground I had conquered. I buttoned my Italian suit jacket and adjusted my cuffs. "Good afternoon, sir," the doorman said, bowing his head low. I looked at him. I did not scowl. I did not remind him of the time he threatened to call security because my truck was parked too close to the entrance. I just nodded. "Good afternoon, son," I said. I walked through the revolving glass doors. The lobby was cool and smelled of expensive lilies. The receptionist's desk was a massive slab of white marble. Behind it sat Jessica, a woman who had mastered the art of looking through people she deemed unimportant. Last week she had made me wait 40 minutes just to hand an envelope to Brent's assistant. Jessica looked up. She saw the suit first. Then she saw the face. Her eyes went wide. She scrambled to stand up, knocking over her pen holder. "Mr. Hayes," she stammered. We were not expecting you. I mean, we heard the news about Mr. Colton, but nobody told us the chairman was coming." I walked up to the marble desk. I placed my hands on the cool stone. "The chairman does not need an appointment, Jessica," I said calmly. "Is the senior management team in the boardroom?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "They are waiting for the interim director. They are very nervous, sir." "Tell them I am on my way up," I said. I walked to the elevators. I did not take the service elevator, which was the only one I had been allowed to use before. I took the executive lift. I pressed the button for the penthouse floor. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Jessica frantically typing on her phone, warning the people upstairs that the storm had arrived. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. I watched the numbers climb. With every floor, I felt a layer of my past life shedding away. The mechanic, the janitor, the invisible man, they were gone. The doors opened directly into the Colton Architecture lobby on the top floor. The view of Atlanta was breathtaking. From here you could see the entire city, including the plot of land where Brent had planned to build his monument to vanity. I walked down the hallway toward the boardroom. The walls were lined with framed awards and architectural renderings. I noticed that every single award was for aesthetic design, not one for structural integrity or community impact. It was all surface, no substance. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the boardroom. 12 men and women were sitting around the long mahogany table. They were Brent's inner circle, the vice presidents, the directors, the yes-men who had laughed at his jokes and enabled his arrogance. When I walked in, the conversation died instantly. They stood up. It was a clumsy, uncoordinated movement born of fear. "Please sit down," I said, my voice echoing in the room. I walked to the head of the table. The chair was high-backed leather, designed to make the person sitting in it look like a king. It was Brent's chair. I did not sit. I stood behind it, placing my hands on the backrest. I looked at their faces. I recognized them. There was the VP of Finance who had approved the loans using my house as collateral. There was the head of marketing who had mocked my truck in the parking lot. "I am Eldridge Hayes," I began. "As of 2 hours ago, my holding company has exercised its right as the primary creditor to assume operational control of this firm." The VP of Finance, a man named Peterson, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes, we understand there has been a change in leadership. We want to assure you that the team is ready to pivot. We have plans to restructure the debt. We can save the Colton Plaza project." I looked at Peterson. He was sweating. "There will be no Colton Plaza," I said. "The project is canceled effective immediately." A murmur of shock went through the room. "But sir," the marketing director spoke up, "we have already spent millions on branding. The pre-sales were promising. If we cancel now, we lose everything. You lost everything the moment you decided to build a luxury shopping center in a neighborhood that needs a grocery store and a library," I said. I picked up a stack of files from the table. I dropped them back down with a loud thud. "I have reviewed the books. This company is rotting from the inside. You have spent more on office furniture and company retreats than you have on safety inspections. You have cut corners on materials. You have stiffed subcontractors." I looked at each of them in turn. "You built a culture of arrogance," I said. "And arrogance is expensive." I pointed to Peterson. "You approved a loan based on a fraudulent asset valuation. You are fired." Peterson's face turned white. "But I have a contract." "Your contract has a clause for gross negligence," I said. "Pack your things." I pointed to the marketing director. "You launched a campaign mocking the working-class residents of the district, calling them blight that needed to be removed. You are fired." I went around the table. One by one, I dismantled the team that Brent had built. I fired the director of operations. I fired the head of design. I fired the HR manager who had helped Brent draft the letter to the nursing home. By the time I was finished, only 3 people remained. The junior architects, the ones who actually did the work while the others took the credit. They looked terrified, waiting for the axe to fall on them too. "You 3, I said, softening my tone slightly. "You are staying." They blinked in confusion. "We are staying," one of them asked. "Yes," I said. "But you are not designing a plaza anymore. I am converting the land use. We are going to build a trade and technical skills center. We are going to teach young people from the neighborhood how to be electricians, plumbers, and carpenters. We are going to give them tools, not shopping bags." I looked at them. "Can you design a building that is functional, durable, and welcoming? A building that honors the people who use it?" The young architects looked at each other. Then they looked at me. For the first time, I saw a spark of genuine excitement in their eyes. "Yes, sir," one of them said. "We can do that." "Good," I said. "Get to work." I turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving the fired executives to collect their personal effects. I did not feel triumph. I felt a sense of cleanliness. I had scrubbed the rust off the gear. I walked down the hall to the corner office. The door had a gold plaque that read, "Brent Colton, President and CEO." I opened the door and walked in. The office was obscene. It was larger than my entire house. There was a putting green in the corner. There was a fully stocked bar. There was a leather sofa that cost more than a Honda Civic. I walked around the desk. It was covered in papers, mostly unfinished sketches and unpaid bills. I felt a ghost in the room. The ghost of the man Brent could have been if he hadn't been so consumed by greed. He had talent. He just didn't have a soul. I sat down in his chair. It was comfortable, but it felt wrong. It felt like stealing. I opened the top drawer. It was full of expensive cigars. I opened the bottom drawer. It was full of empty liquor bottles. I sighed. I spun the chair around to look out the window. The sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Then I saw it. In the corner of the room, under a sleek modern side table, was a metal wastebasket. It was overflowing with trash that Brent had cleared off his desk in a rage before he left for court. Sticking out of the trash was a silver frame. I leaned down. My joints protested, but I ignored the pain. I reached into the bin and pulled it out. The glass was cracked. A spiderweb fracture ran right through the center. I brushed off the coffee grounds and the crumpled paper. I looked at the photograph inside. It was taken 10 years ago. It was the day Jasmine graduated from college. Etta was still alive. She was standing on the left, wearing her Sunday hat, smiling that smile that could light up a room. I was standing on the right, wearing my old blue suit, looking proud. And in the middle was Jasmine. She looked happy, truly happy. Her arm was around my waist. Brent was not in the photo. He hadn't met her yet. This was us. Before the money, before the ambition, before the rot. Brent had thrown it away. To him, it was just clutter. It was a reminder of the humble roots he wanted his wife to forget. He had tried to erase our history by tossing it in a trash can. I took a handkerchief from my pocket. I carefully wiped the grime off the glass. I could not fix the crack. The crack would always be there, running through our family, just like it ran through the photo. But the faces were still there. The love was still visible underneath the damage. I stood up. I cleared a space in the center of the massive executive desk, pushing aside the crystal paperweights and the Mont Blanc pens. I placed the photograph there, right in the middle. "This office belongs to me now," I whispered. "And in my office, we do not throw away family." I looked at Etta's face in the photo. "I did it, Etta," I said softly. "I saved what was left." I stood there for a long time, watching the sun go down over the city that I had helped build. I was the CEO, I was the chairman, I was the victor. But as I touched the cracked glass of the picture frame, I knew that my most important job was just beginning. I had to rebuild something far more complicated than a skyscraper. I had to rebuild a life. I turned off the lights, leaving the photo bathed in the glow of the city outside. I walked out of the office and closed the door. Tomorrow I would start the work. Tonight I would go home to my empty house and sleep in my own bed. And for the first time in years, I would not have to lock the door. 6 months had passed since the day the gavel fell in Judge Vance's courtroom. 6 months of silence between me and my daughter. To the world, I was the reclusive billionaire reshaping the Atlanta skyline with community centers and affordable housing. I was on the cover of magazines. I was receiving awards. But every evening when I went home to my empty house, I did not feel like a tycoon. I felt like a father waiting by the phone. I knew where she was. I had never lost track of her. A father never stops watching, even when he has to watch from the shadows. It was a Tuesday night in November. The rain was coming down hard, turning the neon lights of the city into blurry streaks of red and blue. My driver Marcus pulled the car into the parking lot of a diner on the outskirts of the city. It was a place called the Rusty Spoon. It was not the kind of place Jasmine used to frequent. There was no valet parking. There was no wine list. There was only the smell of frying grease and the sound of clattering dishes. I rolled the window down just an inch. I could see her through the plate glass window. She was wearing a faded yellow uniform that was a size too big. Her hair, which used to be styled in salons that charged $300 a visit, was tied back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could hide. She was carrying a heavy tray of dirty dishes, balancing it on her hip as she navigated the crowded dining room. I watched as she reached table 6. A group of rowdy teenagers had left a mess, ketchup smeared on the table, napkins torn to shreds, fries crushed into the carpet. Jasmine set the tray down and began to wipe the table. She was moving as fast as she could, but her movements were stiff. She was on her feet for 10 hours a day now. I knew that pain. I knew the ache in the lower back and the burning in the soles of the feet. Suddenly the kitchen door swung open. A man marched out. He was short, heavy-set, and his face was red with anger. It was the manager. I had looked him up. His name was Rick, and he was a petty tyrant who enjoyed making his employees feel small. "Jasmine!" he shouted across the restaurant. Jasmine jumped. She dropped the rag. Rick marched over to her, pointing a thick finger in her face. "Table 4 has been waiting for their check for 10 minutes, he yelled. "What are you doing? You are moving like a turtle. Do you think I pay you to daydream?" "I am sorry, Rick," Jasmine said. Her voice was quiet. "I was just cleaning up this mess." "I do not care about the mess," Rick spat. "I care about turnover. You are slow, Jasmine. You are clumsy. You are practically useless tonight. If you cannot handle the rush, maybe you should go back to whatever country club you came from." I flinched. The word useless. It hung in the air. I watched Jasmine face. 6 months ago, she would have screamed back. She would have thrown the apron on the floor. She would have said, "Do you know who I am?" But tonight she did not scream. She stood there taking the abuse. She looked down at her shoes, the cheap non-slip shoes she had bought with her own money. "I am sorry, Rick," she repeated. "I will do better." She picked up the rag and hurried to table 4. I felt a tightening in my chest. It was hard to watch. It is unnatural for a father to watch his child suffer. I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to buy the restaurant just so I could fire Rick on the spot. I wanted to take her away from the grease and the noise. But I gripped the door handle and forced myself to stay put. This was the fire. Steel is not forged in comfort. It is forged in the fire. She was learning humility. She was learning that the person serving the food is just as human as the person eating it. She was learning the lesson that no university could teach her. I watched her for another hour. The rush died down. The diner became quiet. Jasmine was refilling the ketchup bottles at the counter. She looked lonely. She looked broken. But then something happened that made me sit up straight. An old man walked into the diner. He looked homeless. His coat was torn, and he was counting coins in his hand. He sat at the counter 3 seats away from Jasmine. He ordered a cup of coffee. Just coffee. He clearly did not have enough money for food. Rick, the manager, saw him. He walked over with a scowl. "We have a minimum order here," Rick growled. "You cannot just buy coffee and take up a seat. Buy a meal or get out." The old man looked embarrassed. He started to get up, his hands shaking as he tried to gather his coins. "I am sorry," he mumbled. "I just wanted to get out of the rain." Rick grabbed the man's cup of coffee and poured it into the sink. "Get out," Rick said, pointing to the door. "We do not want your kind here scaring away the paying customers." I saw Jasmine freeze. She was holding a bottle of ketchup. She looked at the manager. Then she looked at the old man, who was shuffling toward the door with his head down. It was the same walk I had when she kicked me out of the house. The walk of a man stripped of his dignity. Jasmine put the bottle down. "Wait," she called out. Rick turned around. "What did you say?" he snapped. "I said wait," Jasmine said. Her voice was shaking, but it was loud. She walked out from behind the counter. She walked past the manager. She went to the old man and gently touched his arm. "Please sit down, sir," she said. Then she looked at Rick. "He is staying," she said, "and he is going to have the meatloaf special and a slice of pie." Rick's face turned purple. "Who is paying for that?" he shouted. "You." "Yes," Jasmine said. She reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a wad of cash. It was her tips for the night, the money she needed for rent, the money she needed for food. She pulled out a $20 bill and slapped it on the counter. "I am paying for it," she said, "and if you have a problem with that, Rick, you can fire me. But you are not going to throw him out into the cold. Not tonight." The diner went silent. The other customers stopped eating. They looked at the waitress in the yellow uniform standing up to the bully. Rick looked at the money. He looked at Jasmine. He saw something in her eyes that scared him. It was a lack of fear. It was the look of someone who had already lost everything and realized they had nothing left to lose but their soul. "Fine," Rick grumbled, snatching the money. "But do not expect any freebies." He stormed back into the kitchen. Jasmine guided the old man back to his seat. She poured him a fresh cup of coffee. She smiled at him. It was a real smile, not the plastic smile she used to give her rich friends. It was a smile of genuine kindness. "Thank you, miss," the old man whispered. "You are an angel." "No," Jasmine said softly. "I am just a girl who learned a hard lesson." I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce, and I felt tears streaming down my face. I let them fall. I did not wipe them away. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. She had given up her own money to protect a stranger. She had risked her job to defend someone weak. She had seen herself in that old man. The rot was gone. The roots had finally hit solid ground. I looked at the calendar on my phone. It had been exactly 6 months. The $50,000 I gave her would be running low. She was probably worried about rent. She was probably scared about the future. But she was not the same woman. The woman who threw my bank book in the trash was dead. The woman in the diner was new. She was stronger. She was kinder. She was my daughter. I tapped on the glass partition. "Marcus," I said. My voice was thick with emotion. "Yes, Mr. Hayes." "We can go now," I said. Marcus looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure, sir? Do you not want to go in?" "No," I said. "Not tonight. Tonight she needs to feel the victory of what she just did. She needs to know she did it alone." I looked one last time through the window. Jasmine was cutting a slice of pie for the old man. She looked tired, but she stood tall. Her chin was up. She had dignity. "It is time, Marcus," I said. "Call the lawyers in the morning. Tell them to prepare the deed for the house. Not the big house, the small cottage by the lake, the one she always liked when she was a child." "You are going to give it to her?" Marcus asked, pulling the car out of the lot. "No," I said, smiling. "I am not going to give it to her. I am going to sell it to her. For $1. And then I am going to invite her to dinner." I leaned back in the seat. The rain was still falling, but the storm inside me had passed. My daughter had come back to me. Not because I bought her back, but because she had walked through the fire and found her way home on her own. They thought I was cruel for cutting her off. They thought I was heartless. But a gardener knows that sometimes you have to prune the branches hard if you want the tree to survive the winter. Jasmine had survived, and come spring she would bloom brighter than ever before. "Drive slow. Marcus," I whispered, closing my eyes. "I want to savor this." The car disappeared into the night, leaving the diner behind. Inside that lighted window was the greatest return on investment I had ever made. I had lost a socialite, but I had gained a human being, and that was worth more than every building in Atlanta. 1 year has passed since the storm broke. The seasons have turned, turning the scorching heat of that courtroom battle into the crisp, cool air of an early November morning. I am sitting on a wooden dock overlooking Lake Lanier. The water is calm, a sheet of glass reflecting the orange and gold leaves of the trees. It is quiet here, the kind of quiet that money cannot buy, the kind of quiet you have to earn. I am not alone. To my left sits a man in a fishing hat that has seen better days. He is baiting a hook with hands that used to sign life sentences. Judge Vance retired 3 months ago. He said he was tired of judging others and wanted to spend the rest of his days judging the fish. To my right sits Samuel Cohen. He is wearing a sweater instead of a suit. It looks strange on him, like seeing a shark wearing a scarf. But he is smiling, a real smile, not the shark grin he uses in depositions. We are 3 old men, 3 survivors of different wars, sitting in silence, watching the bobbers float on the water. We do not talk about the past. We do not talk about the trial. We do not talk about Brent, who is currently serving the 2nd year of his sentence in a federal facility for wire fraud. Those ghosts are gone, buried under the weight of justice. Instead, we talk about the water. We talk about the wind. We talk about the soreness in our knees when it rains. Vance catches a small bass. He laughs, a deep, rumbling sound that scares the birds from the trees. He releases the fish back into the water. "Go home, little one," Vance says gently. "You have more growing to do." I watch the fish swim away. It reminds me of the second chance I was given. Not the chance to make money. I always knew how to do that. But the chance to be a human being again. For 40 years, I hid my success because I was afraid people would only love me for my wallet. I was right. But in hiding it, I also hid myself. Now, I am out in the open. The world knows Eldridge Hayes is a wealthy man. But the people sitting on this dock know that Eldridge Hayes is just a man who likes to fish. Cohen pours coffee from a thermos. It is strong and black, just the way we learned to drink it when we were young and hungry. "The Trade Center opens next week," Eldridge Cohen says, looking at the lake. "The enrollment is full. 500 kids from the inner city signed up to learn carpentry and welding." I nod. I feel a warmth in my chest that has nothing to do with the coffee. "Good," I say. "Make sure they have good tools, Sam. Do not buy the cheap stuff. Buy them tools that will last a lifetime." Cohen chuckles. "Do not worry. We ordered the best. The suppliers gave us a discount when they heard the story. They called it the Sergeant Hayes Special." I smile. My legacy is no longer a pile of bank statements. It is a building full of noise and sawdust and young people building their own futures. It is a plaza that does not sell luxury handbags, but sells dignity. We sit there for another hour until the sun is high in the sky. Then I hear a sound coming from the long gravel driveway. It is not a limousine. It is not a sports car. It is the heavy grinding sound of the county bus stopping at the gate. I turn around. I see a figure walking down the long path toward the lake house. She is carrying a plastic container. She is wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. She is walking in sneakers, not heels. It is Jasmine. My heart does the thing it always does when I see her. It jumps. But this time, it does not tighten with fear. She walks onto the dock. She looks healthy. The dark circles are gone. Her hands are rougher than they used to be, red from scrubbing and working, but they look strong. She works as an assistant manager at a bakery now. She earned the promotion 2 months ago. She pays her own rent. She pays for her own bus pass. "Hello, Dad," she says. "Hello, Jasmine," I say. She nods to the other men. "Hello, Judge Vance. Hello, Mr. Cohen." They nod back respectfully. They know the journey she has walked. They respect the miles she has covered. "I brought something," Jasmine says, lifting the plastic container. "I made it this morning. It is a lemon pound cake. I used Mom recipe." She opens the container. The cake is not perfect. It is a little lopsided. The icing is uneven. It does not look like the cake she used to order from the French patisserie for $500. It looks beautiful. She cuts 4 slices. We sit on the dock, the 4 of us, holding the cake in paper napkins. I take a bite. It tastes of lemon and butter. It tastes of effort. It tastes of repentance. "How is it?" she asks nervously. I look at her. I look at the woman who once demanded millions, and now offers me a piece of cake. "It is perfect," I say. "It tastes exactly like Etta used to make." Jasmine smiles. It is a shy smile, a real smile. "I did not have enough sugar," she admits. "I had to improvise with honey. It is better this way," I say. We eat in silence. She does not ask me for a loan. She does not ask me to buy her a car. She does not complain about the bus ride. She just sits with her father and his friends and watches the water. This is the victory. The victory is not that I kept my money. The victory is that I got my daughter back. I had to break her heart to save her soul, but looking at her now sitting in the sunlight, I know it was worth it. After a while, she stands up. "I have to go," she says, checking her watch. "The bus leaves in 20 minutes. I have the evening shift at the bakery." I stand up too. "Wait," I say. She stops, looking worried. "Did I do something wrong?" she asks. "No," I say, "but you forgot something." I whistle. A sharp, loud whistle. From the porch of the house, a small boy runs out. He is 7 years old now. He is wearing denim overalls and holding a toy truck. Leo. He sees his mother and runs to her. "Mommy!" Jasmine catches him and hugs him tight. She buries her face in his neck. She has not seen him since Sunday. I have been watching him while she works double shifts. "He missed you," I say, "and he learned something today." I walk over to my tackle box. I open it. But inside there are no fishing lures. Instead, there is a small set of tools. Real tools. Miniature wrenches and screwdrivers, perfectly sized for a child's hands. "Come here, Leo," I say. My grandson lets go of his mother and walks to me. He looks up at me with big brown eyes. Eyes that look like mine. Eyes that look like Etta. "Show your mother what we learned," I say. Leo reaches into the box. He picks up a small wrench. He does not hold it like a toy. He holds it by the handle, balancing the weight just like I taught him. "You hold it at the end, Mommy," Leo says, his voice serious and proud. "That is where the leverage is. If you hold it near the head, you have no power. But if you hold it here, you can turn anything, even the big bolts." Jasmine looks at her son. Then she looks at me. Her eyes fill with tears. "Leverage," I say softly, looking at her. "It is all about where you place your hand." Jasmine nods. She understands. She tried to find leverage in money and status, and she found nothing. Now, she is finding leverage in hard work and love, and she is moving mountains. "I am proud of you, Jasmine," I say. She starts to cry, but she wipes the tears away quickly. "Thank you, Dad," she whispers. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it." I kiss her on the forehead. "Go to work," I say. "Do not miss your bus. She hugs Leo one last time. "Be good for Grandpa," she says. "Learn everything he teaches you." "I will, Mommy," Leo says. We watch her walk back up the path. She walks lighter now. She has a purpose. I sit back down on the dock. Leo sits next to me, holding his wrench. Grandpa Leo asks, "Are you rich?" I look at the water. I look at my friends. I look at the small boy beside me. And I think about the woman walking to the bus stop to earn $12 an hour with dignity. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air. "Yes, Leo," I say. "I am the richest man in the world, but it has nothing to do with the bank." I put my arm around him. "Never forget this, Leo. They can take your house. They can take your car. They can even take your name, but they can never take what you know and who you are. That is the only real property you will ever own." Leo nods, although he does not fully understand yet. He will. I have time to teach him. I look at the wrench in his hand. It is just a piece of metal, cold and hard. But in the right hands, it can fix a broken engine. It can build a bridge. It can even fix a broken family. I pick up my fishing rod. "Cast the line, Leo," I say. "Let us see what is waiting for us beneath the surface." He throws the line into the water. The ripples spread out in perfect circles, getting wider and wider until they touch the shore. Life is simple, really. You reap what you sow. You fix what you break. And if you are lucky enough to have a second chance, you hold on to it with both hands and you never let go. The sun begins to set, turning the lake into fire. I am Eldridge Hayes. I am a father. I am a grandfather. And for the first time in a long time, I am at peace. The water settles. The reflection of the sky is perfect, and the roots are growing strong, deep in the dark earth where no one can see them, but where they will hold us up forever. My journey taught me that the strongest foundations are not made of concrete or cash, but of character. For years I thought protecting my family meant shielding them from struggle, but I realized that struggle is exactly what gives us strength. True love is not about giving someone everything they want. It is about giving them what they need, even if it breaks your heart to do it. I had to lose the people I loved to save them, and in the process, I found that dignity is the only currency that never devalues. You can rebuild a fortune, but you can never buy back a lost soul. If you believe that respect must be earned, and that it is never too late to stand up for your dignity, please hit the like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to practice tough love to save a relationship? I will be reading your stories. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption.